Chapter 47:25. Sure enough, as soon as the venerable Peach Blossom Immortal finished speaking, the soul-locking arrow jumped out of the black hole. The soul-locking arrow seemed to be drunk from the start. It shook its head and felt dizzy. After finally distinguishing the direction with great difficulty, she saw Xiao Mu as if she had seen a delicious snack, and hastily dashed in her direction. Annoying! Emolienne stared unhappily at the bouncing soul-locking arrow. Suddenly, she opened her inner world, and took out a small bronze cauldron. Arbor's eyes lit up. Jojo's lotus was indeed ferocious. Looking at the situation, was she going to refine this annoying soul-locking arrow directly? The soul-locking arrow seemed to have sensed something. It turned around and scuttled. The tail of the arrow trembled slightly, and burrowed into the black hole that Emolienne had torn open. But very quickly, it came out from the other side of the black hole again. Very intelligently it braked in the air. If it had a face, it would definitely make a scared shitless expression at this moment. There was nothing else. It had burrowed into the black hole, and escaped again. It was getting closer and closer to that expressionless kid. Was he that scary? The soul-locking arrow retreated a little, but a huge suction force suddenly pulled it over. With a clang, the soul-locking arrow fell into the small bronze cauldron. This time, it was like a ferocious tiger entering a cage. Everyone could only hear the incessant clang 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 sounds. The soul-locking arrow struggled to get out of the small bronze cauldron. It knocked the cauldron's lid flying outwards. Emolienne pressed her hand down, and added a stream of holy power to seal the small bronze cauldron. She narrowed her eyes, and raised her hand to throw in a stream of holy fire. Black flames suddenly sprang up from the bottom of the bronze cauldron. Instantly, the small cauldron was roasted to a faint red color. Arbor frowned as he looked at the inconspicuous small bronze cauldron in Emolienne's hand. He suddenly thought of something, and used his divine sense to enter the Tianji secret realm. Ever since he came out of the Tianji secret realm, he had been busy urging Jojo's lotus to cultivate. Arbor did not have time to give the crafting cauldron to Lotus. At this moment, seeing him summon that small broken cauldron to refine the soul-locking arrow, Arbor finally remembered. After a quick search, he dug out the best crafting cauldron in the world, heaven and earth, from the vault guarded by the 100 or so mechanical men. The funny thing was, Charles sensed that she was taking away their treasures. At first, they stacked on top of each other, and hung on the crafting cauldron, hugging it tightly without letting go. Then, because they couldn't snatch Jojo from him, they were thrown to the ground one by one, and they couldn't help but cry. That comical scene scared Arbor so much that he hurriedly locked them all in the small vault, and closed the door. Out of sight, out of mind. Damn it, using a face that was similar to hers and crying nonstop. It really looked like a fantasy. Arbor took out the heaven and earth cauldron, and stuffed it into Emolienne's arms. Lien, use this to refine it. Everything that Emolienne was doing right now was practically coming from his instincts. Strictly speaking, he was still in a state of half-cultivation, and was not fully awake. But now he was not completely unconscious. Seeing that Jojo gave him a palm-sized crafting cauldron that shone with a glazed luster, Emolienne instinctively felt joy in his heart. Just as he made a contract with the heaven and earth cauldron, a thunderous roar came from the bottom of the ocean. Everyone's heart skipped a beat as a bad premonition floated in their hearts. For some reason, this unknown sense of danger was so strong. The sudden danger caused everyone's hearts to jump to their throats. Chapter 47:26. Emolienne instinctively kept the cauldron of heaven and earth into her inner world, and turned around to look at the depths of the sea. Under the layers of glaciers, a head slowly emerged from the whirlpool of silver-white ice crystals. Everyone was on tenterhooks as they broke out in cold sweat. They thought that this mature sacred beast would be a ferocious beast from the ancient times. With a bloody mouth and a body that was as tough as copper, it should be as tall as a small mountain. But they didn't expect that. What emerged from the whirlpool of ice crystals was actually a human head. The beast in front of them was just as they had imagined. Its upper body was still in the form of a human, and its face was almost as white as snow. Its eyes were slightly closed, and its eyebrows and lips were silver white in color. Arbor took a look and retracted his gaze. His gaze landed on the soul-locking arrow that was trapped inside the small bronze cauldron. Bang! In just a few seconds, the soul-locking arrow knocked away the ordinary weapon cauldron. Emolian frowned slightly. This ordinary cauldron that had been with him for a long time was destroyed by the soul-locking arrow, just like that. He stretched out 2 fingers and grabbed the soul-locking arrow that was still trying to fly forward. A cold light flashed in the depths of his eyes. On the other side, Long Qian subconsciously took a few steps back. When she touched Long Shangyun's arm, she quickly grabbed the ladder and whispered, "Let's go. Let's go up first. We'll talk after we get up." Long Qian wasn't stupid. She could already feel the heavy pressure that was coming from the demonic sea beast in human form. How strong was this pressure? Unknowingly, she was pressured to the point of suffocation. There were many juniors from the dragon clan in the sea, and none of them were a match for the demonic sea beast. The Wangshuan dragon clan still had to rely on these juniors to develop, so they couldn't all die here. Therefore she was very anxious. She grabbed Long Shangyun's hand and whispered, "Let's go. We'll retreat first." Long Shangyun also felt the danger. After Long Qian grabbed her arm, she instinctively flung it away, as if she was stung by a poisonous snake. Her instinctive reaction caused Long Qian's face to turn red from embarrassment. Her own granddaughter avoided her like a viper. This made her feel uncomfortable, and at the same time, anger rushed to her heart. The Wangchuan dragon clan was completely ungrateful. She really hoped that this demonic sea beast could hear her and devour all these ingrates. "Let's go." Long Qian came out of the hot sea and grabbed his sister Long Shangyun's arm. Long Qian instinctively grabbed onto Long Shangyun's other arm and refused to let go. "Shangyun, you know how grandmother used to treat you." She could only rely on the defensive barrier to resist the scalding seawater outside. If Xiang Yin didn't continue to use her spiritual power to support the defensive barrier around her body, after losing the defensive barrier, she would definitely be scalded to the point where her skin would split open, and her bones wouldn't even be left. Long Shangyun closed her eyes, turned around, and was about to pull her up with her. The terrified cries of the Dragon Clan's juniors could be heard all around. "Ah, why is the seawater so hot? Oh my god, it's too hot." When Long Qian saw the hundreds of juniors from the Dragon Clan, her eyes widened. She couldn't help but shout at them, "Why are you here? Could it be that the battle above had ended? That shouldn't be the case." Chapter 47-27. Even if they had already won the battle above, these juniors shouldn't have rashly entered the sea to follow them. "Let's go, let's go." Clan leader, defensive walls have been erected all around here. What's this? This was the sacred beast confinement zone set up by the mature sacred beast in front of them. Long Qian couldn't help but shudder. He abruptly turned around and glared at Long Qian. "Grandmother, were you the one who awakened this mature sacred beast slumbering at the bottom of the sacrificial sea?" How could Long Qian admit it at a time like this? How would she dare to admit such a thing? Even if she was the one who summoned it, she didn't dare to admit it. Besides, she had no confidence at all. Previously, she wanted to summon a powerful demonic sea beast to force the little stoic to hand over the shark pearl. But now things had clearly spiraled out of her control. Even she felt powerless to reverse the situation. "Stop wasting time. Let's go." Long Qian roared anxiously at Long Qian. She turned around and saw that the half-human sacred beast had already crawled out of the ice crystal abyss. Yes, half-human. The lower half of this sacred beast's body was coiled with a giant snake tail. Long Qian guessed that if it expanded its body, it would probably be 100 meters long. It was obvious that Long Qian had underestimated the strength of this sacred beast's snake tail. It suddenly uncoiled its snake tail. Even though it was only half uncoiled, it still crushed dozens of Dragon Clan youths. Those youths from the forgetful Chuan Dragon Clan, who had just entered the sea and hadn't recovered from the heat of the sea, were instantly sent flying by that giant snake tail and crashed onto the ground. They didn't even have a chance to cry out before their bones and muscles were pulverized, and they all went to the Yellow Springs. "Long Qian! Run! Run!" Before Long Qian could finish her hysterical screams, the humanoid holy beast opened its eyes dangerously. His eyes were almost transparent, and they flickered with a dangerous, bloodthirsty glint. Xiaomu obediently played the role of a little quail, hiding in Emolien's embrace, as she furtively peeked at that crazed humanoid sacred beast. The venerable peach blossom immortal hurriedly whispered to Arbor, "No matter what happens later, remember not to escape into the galaxy. Cover it properly and don't open it." Arbor's pupils shrank slightly. She immediately understood what the venerable peach blossom immortal meant. This meant that in front of this mature holy beast, any space was useless. Escaping into the star field would only speed up his own death. That was because he was able to ignore the laws of space. If he were to follow Zhang Xian in, the consequences would be dire. Based on how bloodthirsty and merciless this saint beast was, it was likely that all the creatures in the star field would be wiped clean, including Arbor, the master of the star system. At the thought of this, Arbor couldn't help but shiver. He then looked at the venerable peach blossom immortal and said, "Let's escape together." These words were spoken very decisively. Running away was probably the best option at the moment. He ran far away and didn't want to confront him head-on. Who asked him to be ruthless? Who asked him to be so pretentious? Who asked him to fly? They didn't want to play with him anymore. Running away was the right thing to do. The venerable peach blossom immortal glanced at the little fellow's sparkling eyes. If it wasn't for the critical situation at the moment, he would have burst out laughing. Why did this fellow make it sound so natural to admit defeat and run away? "I'm afraid it's too late to run away. This sacred beast looks like it has gone berserk." Once he dealt with those dragon clan members who were like little worms, what would happen next? Chapter 47:28. Then they would become targets. The humanoid sacred beast would focus on them. Now that he had erected the sacred beast realm everywhere, how could the people inside escape? "Jojo, don't let the little white snake and the others out," Mai-chen whispered to her. If this mature sacred beast saw the little white snake and the others, it would happily devour them. Arbor nodded, secretly breaking out in cold sweat. Luckily, Mai-chen and the others were still thousands of miles above the sea. Now that this place was blocked by the sacred beast realm, it naturally wouldn't be able to sense them. As for the little white snake, she had already kept it in her galaxy. Otherwise, if they were targeted by this humanoid sacred beast, Arbor's heart shuddered, secretly rejoicing. At this time, Long Qian felt that her heart was about to stop. She watched as the young people of her clan were killed by the humanoid sacred beast like vegetables. With a sweep of his hand, they were turned into a pile of minced meat. Long Qian couldn't help but spit out a mouthful of blood. "Don't kill them, don't kill them." This humanoid demonic beast was killing the future of the dragon clan. How could this be? How could this be? Shouldn't the demonic sea beasts of the Forgotten River Dragon clan be their sacred beast guardian? Why would he attack indiscriminately? Look at his cold eyes. He couldn't see anyone at all. It was as if everyone in front of him was a small insect that had invaded his territory. Only by crushing them one by one would he be able to continue sleeping peacefully. It shouldn't be like this. Long Qian looked at the scene in front of her, with tears streaming down her face. She felt as if a sharp knife was gouging the flesh from her heart. These young people, who could create the future of the Forgotten River Dragon clan. But they were all killed by a sacred beast. He watched as the Dragon clan's people were swept up into the air by the demonic sea beast's tail, like the autumn wind sweeping away the fallen leaves, before turning into a pile of dust that fell to the ground. Long Qian's body fell backward and landed heavily on the ground. There was no hope. There was no hope. To think that the future of the Dragon clan would be written in such a hilarious way. The youths of the Forgotten River Dragon clan had all died in this comical battle. What future did they have left to write? The funniest thing was that this humanoid holy beast was the trump card that the Forgetful River Dragon clan's clan leader had personally summoned. It was a trump card that he intended to use against his own granddaughter. However, even Long Qian herself was baffled by the sudden turn of events. When the last member of the Dragon clan, who was desperately trying to escape to the surface of the sea, was smashed into meat paste by the huge tail of the humanoid saint beast, Long Shengyun lowered her head to take a look and couldn't help but jump in fright. Long Qian's eyes were wide open, as if he had just seen something unbelievable. His entire body was stiff and his face was stiff. Grandmother! Long Xiangyun cried out in a mournful voice, trembling as she reached out to feel for her grandmother's breath. Ah! Long Xiangyun's body fell backwards into the scalding sea water. Long Qian rushed over with a calm expression. He reached out to feel the old lady's breath before turning around and nodding at Long Xiangyun. Grandmother, she's gone. Long Xiangyun shuddered as she looked at Long Qian's furious face. She couldn't help but mumble. Brother, grandmother must have been angered to death. This was the biggest joke in the world. The forgetful River Dragon Clan's clan leader was angered to death. Chapter 47-29. Long Qian's heart ached when she saw this. Unable to withstand such a huge blow, she fell backward and fell into the boiling water with her shield. His whole body sizzled as it was being burned by the boiling hot sea water. Grandmother! Long Qian quickly rushed over with a calm expression. He raised his hand and touched the old lady's nose. Then, he turned around and looked at his sister with a strange expression. Grandmother, she's not breathing. Long Xiangyun shivered and lowered her head to look at Long Qian. Her eyes were wide open, and she looked like she had died with a grievance. It was a terrifying sight. Long Xiangyun subconsciously reached out and grabbed her brother's hand. She couldn't help but mumble. Brother, grandmother, could it be that she died from anger? This was the biggest joke in the world. The dignified leader of the Wangchuan dragon clan was angered to death by a mature sacred beast? Who would believe it if he told them about it? Long Qian shook his head. She was severely injured before this. In other words, the leader of the dragon clan probably knew that he didn't have long to live, because he was severely injured before, and seeing the juniors of the Wangchuan dragon clan being massacred, he couldn't do anything about it. He was so angry that he couldn't recover. She left so suddenly. Long Qian and his sister looked at each other, not knowing what to think. Their grandmother, who had always been decisive, had passed away in such a strange way. Although she had stopped breathing, their grandmother was now a transcendent realm cultivator. Her divine sense could probably suddenly. Long Huan's gaze changed slightly. He quickly pulled Long Xiangyun, who was beside him, and quickly retreated. Long Xiangyun suddenly hugged her head and cried out in alarm. Her body trembled uncontrollably as she shivered. Xiangyun! Long Qian stared at Long Xiangyun angrily. As he reached out to support her, he couldn't help but shout angrily. Grandmother! Your divine sense quickly retreat from Xiangyun's body. She can't withstand your transcendent realm divine sense. She will... Ah! Long Xiangyun's body stiffly fell backwards. At the same time, the mature sacred beast that had swept through the entire forgotten River Dragon clan slowly turned its cold and indifferent glassy eyes in their direction. Just like that, he stared coldly at Long Xiangyun across the churning magma-like seawater. Long Huan's heart almost jumped out of his chest. Suddenly, they saw the humanoid super holy beast stretching out its huge snake tail and sweeping it towards them. Long Shi didn't have time to think. He quickly grabbed Long Xiangyun's body and retreated. At the same time, clusters of black flames suddenly ignited in Emolien's hand, firmly locking the soul-locking arrow that was trying to escape in a panic in her palm. With the burning of the holy fire, the soul-locking arrow became a little more obedient. It lay on Emolien's palm and stopped courting death, probably because it realized that the man in front of it was a terrifying guy who could refine itself. The soul-locking arrow obediently stayed in his palm and pretended to be dead. After Emolien finished burning the soul-locking arrow, he suddenly flicked his hand. A stream of light flew out. The soul-locking arrow flew towards the humanoid holy beast at lightning speed. The arrow pierced towards the beast's thick snake tail. 40480 had some small changes. It was mainly to increase the old lady's mental activity. It didn't matter if she saw it or not. Chapter 47-30. Even Arbor could not help but look at the death-courting arrow in a different light. Not only did this thing only know how to bully the weak Joe, it even dared to confront a super sacred beast. In the blink of an eye, the humanoid sacred beast suddenly turned its head. A pair of cold glassy eyes stared fixedly at the soul-locking arrow. The soul-locking arrow made a 360-degree turn in the air, and swiftly flew towards Emolien with a whoosh. Arbor was speechless. She took back her previous compliments. A coward was a coward. Persimmons were soft persimmons. The soul-locking arrow flew to Emolien's side and pretended to be dead. Arbor looked at it with disdain. To think that you are a sacred weapon. Who would have thought that you were such a big coward? Spiritual weapons had spirits. Furthermore, this was a sacred weapon. This thing had already been enlightened and understood human nature. Arbor's glance seemed insignificant, but it contained a great deal of mockery. The soul-locking arrow jumped twice in the air. It wanted to charge down and continue to aim at Arbor. However, upon seeing Emolien's pitch-black eyes coldly sweep over, the soul-locking arrow immediately became docile. The humanoid sacred beast was stopped by the soul-locking arrow. Its attention was focused on Emolien and He Jiechen. Long Huan, who had escaped death, was covered in cold sweat. He suddenly turned and grabbed Long Shangyun's hand. He lowered his voice and growled, "Come out!" Long Shangyun flung Long Huan's hand away. She pursed her lips. When she raised her head again, her eyes were filled with vicissitudes and coldness. "Do you know the past of the Forgotten River Dragon clan?" Long Shangyun stared coldly at Long Huan. She said word by word, "The overlord of the Forgotten River for 100 years. Half of the country was under his control. During the most prosperous period, even the emperors of the 3 continents had to bow and respectfully greet the Forgotten River Dragon clan's patriarch as Senior Long. Our clan once had the world's strongest guardian beast, the sacred beast Black Dragon." The cold sweat on Long Huan's forehead rolled down one by one. He really wanted to kneel down and beg this grandmother to stop causing trouble. Come out of his sister's body. At this moment, Long Shangyun's body was barely able to support Long Qian's spiritual soul. As time passed, she would definitely collapse. Long Huan, you should have guessed it. If this guardian beast did not go berserk for some reason, the Dragon clan's ancestors would not plan to get rid of it, scatter its spirit, and seal it in the Black Soul Pearl. For this reason, our tribe has been secretly researching the reason why the Black Dragon went berserk. Long Huan's of the Black Dragon clan's eyes. Long Huan clenched his fists, his voice trembling. "Grandmother, can you stop talking? Come out of Xiang Yun's body first." Long Shangyun's body was already cracking, and wisps of blood were seeping out from her skin. Long Shangyun raised her head. It was as if her head had been pulled up from the back of her head by a hook. Her head was twisted at an angle. We call these berserk holy beasts that don't even recognize their own kin exterminators. Because when they went berserk, they could destroy everything in the world. At this point, Long Shangyun suddenly laughed wildly with a twisted expression. Her sharp voice was mixed with a trace of age. "Since we can't go back to the past, then let the others be destroyed with our Forgotten River Dragon clan." Chapter 47-31. Long Shangyun's expression was very apathetic as she reached out and took a space ring from Long Qian's corpse. "Grandmother!" Long Qian shouted in horror. However, Long Shangyun quickly took out several bottles of clear blue medicinal liquid and threw them into the sea. The surroundings immediately emitted a strange fragrance, and the entire underwater abyss was enveloped by this smell. A berserk factor surged in the humanoid sacred beast's eyes. It was accompanied by Long Shangyun's half-shrill, half-aged voice. "Although we haven't been able to develop a method to break this berserk state. However, ha 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 ha, we have extracted an item from the sacred beast Black Dragon's body that can make a berserk medicinal liquid. In the eyes of an exterminator, everything in the world must be destroyed without exception. Ha 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 ha." Long Shangyun laughed maniacally until blood seeped out of her facial orifices. She looked especially terrifying as blood trickled down her face. The humanoid sacred beast's body suddenly doubled in size. The entire azure sea was pressed down on the top of its head, and the eerily cold underwater abyss was coiled up beneath its body. It bared a mouthful of fangs and lowered its head to whip its tail without any explanation, striking at the place where Emolien and Jichen were standing. Emolien reflexively flung the little stoic outside. The Raven Moon sword was already in her hand, and she swiftly drew a stream of black flames to meet that huge tail head-on. The black flames landed on the humanoid sacred beast's huge tail, but they were swiftly repelled. The venerable Peach Blossom Immortal's divine sword scraped against the snake's hard scales, and he felt the web between his thumb and index finger go slightly numb from the shock. When he withdrew his sword to take a look, he couldn't help but be dumbfounded. A divine weapon was completely rolled up from the sword tip to the blade. It was clear how sturdy that fellow's scales were. The venerable Peach Blossom Immortal's face was cold as he casually tossed that divine weapon out. With a point of his finger, the divine weapon exploded with a boom. The unrestrained flow of water slapped in all directions. A divine weapon's explosion, at such a close distance, didn't injure that humanoid sacred beast in the slightest. This sacred beast merely glanced at Ji-chan indifferently before swiftly swimming toward him. Rotten Peach Blossom. Arbor's heart raced at this moment, and her gaze was somewhat dazed. She felt her heart beating so fast that it was about to jump out of her chest. The humanoid holy beast was too fast. So fast that she didn't even have time to react. The sacred beast's huge body was like a huge black screen, suppressing the light in front of the venerable Peach Blossom Immortal. Emolien's movements were also very fast. Seeing that the situation was not right, he almost instinctively threw out a hidden weapon that he carried with him. With a slight movement of his fingertips, more than 10 expressionless golems were summoned from his space ring. They surged forward to besiege the humanoid holy beast. At the same time, he appeared beside the venerable Peach Blossom Immortal and pulled him away from the human-shaped divine beast. The huge tail of the humanoid holy beast fell down and slammed into the sea. The sweeping force caused the two of them to stumble forward. All of a sudden, a whirlpool appeared in the depths of the ocean. A terrifying suction force instantly wrapped around a section of the humanoid holy beast's tail. Emolien and the venerable Peach Blossom Immortal looked back at the same time. Without needing to greet each other, they simultaneously launched a swift and powerful attack toward the head of the humanoid holy beast. Black flames mixed with green with spiritual energy were wrapped in two streams of sacred power. They ruthlessly slammed into the head of the humanoid holy beast. Bam! A bloody bump appeared on the forehead of the holy beast from the explosive force. Chapter 4732. 4. 0484 Fushi Great Sword. Emolien and Yuan Shurchen did not need to communicate at all. Even if Emolien was still in a state of half-cultivation, he also knew the principle of taking advantage of a person's weakness to take his life. Seeing that the humanoid divine beast's tail was entangled by a mysterious force in the abyss, how could they not take advantage of this opportunity to kill him? The two of them released their saint powers and smashed it all on the head of the unlucky humanoid divine beast, as if it was free of charge. The group of mechanical men summoned by Emolien were even more impressive. They did not care about their lives at all and pounced forward one after another. The swords, spears, swords and halberds in their hands were all aimed at the upper body of the humanoid divine beast. The lower body of the humanoid divine beast was like an iron bastion. If they were to attack, it would be best to aim at his upper body. Now that this fellow was entangled by the force in the abyss, it was a good opportunity for everyone to torture him. A series of attacks were aimed at this fellow's face. This humanoid divine beast was so enraged that he roared continuously. His cold glazed eyes stared straight in the direction of Emolien and Yuan Shurchen with an expression of hatred. Even if you hit someone, you would not hit their face. Not to mention that he was a senior at the level of a mature divine beast. This bunch of little bastards, they really did not want to live anymore. They actually dared to attack this senior's face. Arbor had been secretly hiding at the side. When she saw this, a section of the Fushi greatsword suddenly appeared in her left hand and quickly pulled it out. The moment she pulled it out, the little fellow's body shook violently a few times. Emolien felt something and turned around to take a look. Instantly, she saw that the little fellow's body was white and seemed to be swaying, as if his soul was about to leave his body. Suddenly, he felt his heart stop for a moment. He hurriedly shouted, "Don't move!" To be honest, Arbor did not even notice what Emolien was shouting at her. At this moment, all her senses were focused on the Fushi great sword in her hand. She could feel an extremely strong force flowing endlessly into her body. The feeling of becoming one with the sword was wonderful. However, Arbor looked up at the sea with a guilty expression. For some inexplicable reason, The surrounding air seemed to have become a few degrees colder. She didn't know if it was a psychological effect, but she kept feeling that ever since she pulled out the Fushi greatsword, she seemed to be able to sense the aura of the heavenly Tao, which suddenly enveloped her. Heavenly Tao, do you dare to come? Come and I'll curse you to death. You don't care about so many people who were smuggled in from the sanctuary. Even if you care about the heavens and earth, you can't care about Jojo drawing the Fushi greatsword. Arbor held the Fushi greatsword in his hand and turned his head to look at the human-shaped sacred beast that was entangled in the abyss. If I don't kill you now, when will I? Arbor carried her greatsword and rushed towards the undersea abyss. That image made one's mouth twitch uncontrollably at a critical moment. Get out of the way. Arbor waved his little hand at Emolien and Yuan Shurchen. His entire body was filled with the power of the Fushi greatsword. She couldn't control it. Lord Jojo raised the Fushi greatsword in his hand high up and slashed down at the human-shaped sacred beast's head in the undersea abyss. The human-shaped sacred beast's pupils constricted silently, and he hurriedly waved his hand to set up a realm. Arbor's Fushi greatsword fell. The speed was almost shocking. At this time, there was no such thing as swordsmanship. Arbor just followed her heart and casually slashed with this sword. It was this sword that struck the sacred beast realm with a loud bang. With just one slash, thousands of spiderweb-like cracks appeared in the realm. Chapter 47-33. A hint of disbelief flashed through the humanoid sacred beast's glassy eyes. It wasn't the only one who was shocked. Emolien and He-Chun were stunned as well. Their gazes landed on the Fushi sword in the little fellow's hand. What a powerful sacred weapon. At this moment, the sword was covered in a layer of intense white light. They could only vaguely see the dense sacred chi flowing on it. Even Xiao Mu herself was taken aback by this attack. She didn't expect the Fushi greatsword to be able to break through the realm of the humanoid sacred beast with a single slash. The spiderweb-like cracks suddenly appeared. Seeing that the humanoid sacred beast's head was about to be pierced, it hurriedly swung its long tail and wrapped itself in it. The power of the sword landed squarely on its tail, scraping its scales and slicing off a piece of flesh from its tail. Everyone felt the pain for the humanoid sacred beast, even though they were separated by the boiling water. Arbor's sword cut through the sea and pointed at the sacred beast. Its power was so great that it made everyone's jaws drop. Long Qian, who was in Long Shangyun's body, couldn't help but stare blankly. She muttered to herself, "No, it's impossible. How is this possible? What kind of sword in the world could slash a saint beast and peel off the scales of a saint beast? This world was truly a fantasy. When did this little girl become so capable?" Long Qian took a deep breath. She couldn't help but clench her fists. This lass's secrets were truly endless. It was as if she had countless trump cards that she would never use at once. She was so young, but she was so scheming. She wasn't easy to deal with. But so what if this sacred weapon was powerful? In the hands of a little deity realm cultivator, no matter how useful it was still very limited. A cold light flashed through Long Qian's eyes. Don't waste your energy struggling. No one can escape from the palm of the berserk sacred beast. Long Qian's face was filled with excitement as she said that. It was an honor for these people to be able to accompany her, the leader of the dragon clan, to die near the Lethe abyss. The humanoid saint beast suddenly let out a furious roar. His glassy eyes suddenly turned into a pair of vertical pupils as he stared coldly at Arbor. The giant tail beneath him suddenly turned into hundreds of afterimages and wrapped around Arbor. Arbor only felt a cold and gloomy aura rushing towards him, and subconsciously wanted to dodge this attack. However, the holy beast was too fast, and Arbor was locked on by his aura, so he couldn't use the power of space to teleport. In a moment of desperation, she subconsciously raised her Fushi greatsword to block the attack. Emolien and He-Chun only felt that this little lady was too audacious. Their hearts were in their throats, and they threw themselves at the little stoic without any explanation. With a loud rumble, the entire seabed abyss collapsed. Subsequently, Xiao Mu's figure flew out and tumbled several times in the seawater, before stabilizing herself with great difficulty. Sir Jojo wiped his face with his small hand and blinked. He waved his hand at Emolien, who rushed over in a panic, indicating that he was fine. Everyone could see with their naked eyes that the entrance to the endless ice cave in the sacrificial sea abyss and the cross-section of the glacier were shattering inch by inch in this earth-shattering quake. The scene in front of them was like a galaxy shattering. The boiling seawater was enveloped by the icy aura emitted from the seabed abyss. Chapter 47:34. The seawater finally started to cool, but very quickly, everyone present felt that something was amiss. The temperature of the seawater was dropping too quickly. In less than a second, everyone felt that the surrounding seawater had frozen into an ice hole. Waves of cold air seeped into their limbs and bones, causing them to shiver uncontrollably. "Jojo!" Wuxia shouted. The humanoid divine beast's roar suddenly drowned out his shout. A pair of vertical glazed eyes were filled with coldness. If it was said that he was a powerful divine beast with some consciousness just now, then he was now a Terminator, who had no consciousness at all, and only knew how to kill. "I will hold him back. You take Jojo and leave first." Wuxia pushed Emolien hard, but the latter did not budge. "What are you waiting for? Let's go. If you die, Jojo will be sad." "Nonsense. How can someone with my level of cultivation die?" The venerable peach blossom immortal suddenly turned to look at Emolien. "You have recovered?" This guy's tone just now sounded very conscious. "Probably." Emolien nodded slightly. "Later I will use the ancient Emolien's real body to deal with him. You will assist me. What's the price?" Wuxia raised his brows and asked. He did not believe that there would be no price to pay for activating the ancient Emolien's real body. Emolien was silent for a moment, then said, "I will probably be in deep sleep for a while." Wuxia rolled his eyes at him. "That won't do. Jojo will cry if you do that." Don't think that he did not know. This guy had sensed Jojo's danger and forcefully removed himself from the state of cultivation. Now that he had gotten rid of his unconscious state, he must have used some secret technique from the ancient inheritance. Correspondingly, the price he had to pay would naturally not be small. By then, if he fell into deep sleep, Jojo would be in tears. No, absolutely not. Ma Ancient waved at him and said, "Alright, cut the crap and stick to the original plan. I'll hold this guy back while you take Jojo and the others away from here. The further away the better." Looking at the current state of this human snake, it should be impossible for him to leave the Forgotten River domain. In short, as long as Jojo and the rest got out of Forget River, they would be safe. Emolien remained silent, but she had made up her mind to activate the ancient Emolien to temporarily deal with this mature sacred beast in front of her. Once he activated the ancient Emolien, he would be completely immersed in the main body of the plant, and it would be difficult for him to extricate himself from it for a short period of time. Ancient Emolien's seal wouldn't harm him in any way. On the contrary, cultivating in a deep sleep was actually very beneficial to him. But if that happened, Jojo would still be sad. Seeing that he was hesitating, Yuan Shurchen didn't waste any more words with him. She directly jumped in front of the human snake. Staring at the other party's vertical pupils, she said coldly, "You little worm that lives in a bottomless pit, you're quite fierce. Do you understand what I'm saying? I wonder how old you are." The venerable peach blossom immortal raised his eyebrows and laughed coldly. "Your opponent is me." Arbor kicked in the water and slid towards the venerable peach blossom immortal at an incredible speed. Halfway there, she was stopped by Emolien. "Stay here obediently and keep your sword." Emolien gazed at her ghastly pale small face and reached out to touch her ice-cold cheek. "Hurry!" Arbor was stunned. She was about to ask if he had regained his consciousness when she saw that Yuan Shurchen was in danger. Chapter 47:35. The berserk sacred beast let out a roar, exuding a boundless chill. Narrowing its eyes, a layer of icy mist appeared around it. With a wave of its hand, it crushed the snowflakes into thousands of pearl-shaped snowflakes that lined up in the air. It flung the snowflakes in the direction of the venerable peach blossom immortal. The cold air that tore through the air rushed toward the venerable peach blossom immortal. If he was hit, even if he didn't die, he would be half dead. His body would be turned into a hornet's nest by the snowflakes. It would be a spectacular sight. In the blink of an eye, Emolian released Xiao Mu and swiftly planted a kiss on her temple. He said softly, "Stay here and don't move. Jojo, remember that no matter what happens to me, I will always be worried about you. No matter how difficult the future is, I will find a way to return to your side." Arbor's heart skipped a beat. She had a feeling that Emolian was implying something. She wanted to ask more. Emolian had already torn open space and moved to the venerable Peach Blossom Immortal's side. When Jichun saw Emolian running over, he couldn't help but panic. "Why did you roll over here? Get lost. Get lost." Emolian didn't even bother to look at him. She said in a low voice, "I said that if you die, Jojo will be sad." "How can I, huh?" Emolian didn't bother to talk nonsense with him. She narrowed her eyes and looked at the berserk human snake. Suddenly, she raised a defensive wall around them. With a cold glint in her eyes, she stared at him and said, "Get back to the seabed abyss." Xiaomu sprinted madly, wanting to dash over, but was blocked outside the defensive wall. "What are you doing?" Arbor panicked. She had a strange feeling that something bad was about to happen. This humanoid sacred beast was indeed very strong, but it wasn't invincible. She planned to explode the mystic realm if she couldn't defeat it. What was Emolian trying to do? Amidst the chaos in Arbor, an ink-colored lotus rose from the ground and grew to the height of dozens of meters in a split second. At this time, even through the defensive wall, they could clearly see that Emolian's complexion had turned a bit pale. "Lian!" Xiaomu shouted harshly. She was almost scared to death by him. Even if he wanted to use ancient Emolian's special technique to deal with the sacred beast in front of him, there was no need to keep her outside the defensive barrier, right? Unless there would definitely be repercussions if he dealt with it this way. Arbor's mind raced. Suddenly, he realized that Emolian might have forced herself out of seclusion. There was a high possibility of this happening. Therefore, if he hastily used the ancient Emolian, it would probably affect his body to a certain extent. What kind of impact would it have? Arbor was so anxious that her eyes turned red. She rushed over and slapped the defensive barrier. "Open it." "Emolian, listen to me." Arbor was both anxious and angry. "If you don't open it, I'll ignore you for the rest of my life." It was like this every time. Every time something happened, she would try to keep Jojo outside and deal with it herself. Jojo wasn't just for show. Jojo could fight alongside her. She wasn't afraid of danger. She was only afraid of Emolian. When things came to a head, she always liked to hide things from her and take on everything herself. "Open it." Ji-chen was also very anxious. However, at this time, the ancient ink lotus had already completely opened its huge corolla. Suddenly, the entire flower was lit up with black flames. The flames spread outward, as if they were going to swallow everything in the world. Chapter 4736. This power was extremely strong. The humanoid sacred beast didn't know if the others felt the same way. Anyway, he had entered an illusion at this moment. Under the endless sea of ink-colored lotus flowers, a tall figure stood in the air above the sea of flowers, staring at him coldly. This was the ancient Emolian's bounded domain. Although the humanoid sacred beast was in a frenzied state at this time, his mind was still somewhat clear. Seeing such a vast and boundless bounded domain, he was shocked and his heart couldn't help but tremble. This bounded domain was too vast and boundless. He didn't know if this person could mobilize all the forces in the bounded domain. Thinking of this, the humanoid snake saw the sea of flowers in front of him churning and rippling. One after another, ink-colored lotuses soared into the air, mixing together in clusters and sticking closely to each other. Petals fell and fluttered in the air, but in front of him was pure darkness. The ink-colored lotus petals covered the sky and the earth, causing the humanoid snake's vertical pupils to reflect this ink-black color. This kind of black color was too pure. Arbor stood outside the defensive wall, only seeing Emolian, Wuxia, and the humanoid snake, suspended in the air in a triangular tripod. Wuxia was anxiously shouting something at Emolian. The other two were facing each other, not moving at all. This soon, The huge ink-colored lotus flower beside Emolien emitted a black luster, covering the humanoid snake. The humanoid snake also emitted a light wheel, protecting himself like a protective circle. Arbor's eyes widened. She was outside the defensive wall, so she didn't know what was happening inside. What she saw was the scene of Emolien and the humanoid snake confronting each other, but she didn't know that the two of them had already entered the divine sense realm. They had already broken away from the battle of the physical body and entered the battle of the divine sense. The humanoid snake's divine sense was locked in the bounded domain by Emolien and couldn't come out for the time being. Now the two of them were just empty shells, both of them in the outer world. At this moment, other than He Chun, who was able to tell that something was amiss, even Long Qian, who had sharp eyes, was shocked and didn't say anything. She didn't see how the rapid change in the situation before her eyes had developed. She also didn't know that Emolien and the Snake Man had engaged in a battle of spiritual awareness. Meanwhile, a familiar exasperated roar came from the sky. Xian Huang, what are you doing? Dark Phoenix, why are you here again? You and Defy the Sky are trying to defy the heavens. If Heavenly Tao had a face right now, it would definitely be an expression of exasperation. I'm telling you, you can't do this. With your strength, if you recklessly interfere in the matters of this place, this region will collapse. It collapsed. Scram! How can you be so rude? The Heavenly Tao was so angry that it was hopping around. Hundreds and thousands of heavenly locks firmly restrained Xian Huang's limbs. With an uncompromising look, it said sternly, "No, I can't let you go. I'll bet my head with you. That brat of yours will definitely be fine. She's definitely alive and well. Right now, this child's soul is just a little unstable. Why are you so anxious?" Scram! The Heavenly Tao was furious. Other than scram, can't you add a few more words? Get the fuck out of here. The Heavenly Tao was speechless. How could Xian Huang be such a person? Was it going to compromise or not? If it didn't let Xian Huang go, would those people from Xian Huang's family come to cause trouble? Wouldn't that be even more troublesome? Chapter 4737. Why not? Looking at the furious Xian Huang in front of him, Tiandao felt very stifled. Xian Huang, and Against the Sky, always took turns to cause trouble here. What should he do now? Heavenly Tao, you old geezer, are you up to something in secret? Those 13 old things on the sea don't look like people from here. Why can they come here but I can't? Because you're much more powerful than all of them combined. Tiandao muttered in his heart. But he would never say this in front of Xian Huang, lest Xian Huang become even more cocky. Tiandao's current thoughts were probably, it's too difficult for me. There would always be a few variables in a continent that was originally developing normally. Can't you just develop properly? You like to have a few little evildoers and perverts every day. Just looking at you makes one feel stifled. Against the Sky, Tiandao suddenly transformed into a half-grown child and pounced on Xian Huang like a tiger. Its meaty hands firmly pressed down on this person's mouth. Stop shouting, stop shouting. Xian Huang looked into Tiandao's bulging eyes at a close distance. She inexplicably had the urge to burst into laughter. This fellow looked too comical and ridiculous. Don't think that you can change the nature of your old bones just because you've turned into a cute baby. Xian Huang scolded expressionlessly. Tiandao's face was bitter as he stammered. Don't alarm Against the Sky again. He came not long ago and can't come again. I'm telling you. Alright, you go back first. Leave the matters here to this old man, okay? No. Xian Huang cried out agitatedly. Her saliva almost sprayed on the old man's face. Tiandao's old face twisted in anger. Then he said with a fierce face, I'm telling you, Xian Huang, don't force me to use my trump card. You can't bear the consequences. Xian Huang stared at the fellow in front of her with disdain. There was still some doubt in her eyes. What trump card? According to her understanding, Tiandao was a coward who bullied the weak and feared the strong. It wasn't that she was looking down on this fellow, but what trump card could it have that could threaten her? Heavenly Tao, who was close at hand, suddenly let out an earth-shattering cry. Xian Huang, he pounced on her and hugged her arm. He wailed, If you don't go back, I'll go to your house every day and cry until you die. Xian Huang. With a wave of his hand, he was unable to shake off the heavenly Tao. Xian Huang suddenly felt helpless. What do you want? Go back. No. Xian Huang angrily slapped the back of his head. Didn't you see that my Xiaobao has taken out the Fushi sword? Her soul is so unstable, and there are still 2 fragments of her soul that have yet to be retrieved, Xian Huang said with a cold face. I have to see with my own eyes that everything is settled, and that she is fine. Yes, I understand. Tiandao wiped his tears and said solemnly, Xian Huang, go back first. Leave this to me. Don't worry. I won't let any of those old fellows who trespassed into the sacred region off. You? Xian Huang glanced at him suspiciously, indicating that she was somewhat doubtful of his words. Tiandao was very soft-hearted. Would he really deal with those outsiders? Hey, don't doubt me. Tiandao noticed the suspicion in her eyes and couldn't help but feel anxious. Let me tell you, I'm really not that unreliable. Chapter 4738. That human-shaped sacred beast was originally left behind from the ancient times, so it can't be considered as an intruder. Tiandao solemnly swore. Although he's unusually fierce, he was actually just woken up by someone. He's also very innocent, isn't he? Xian Huang. Just like you, if you're suddenly woken up from a good sleep, you'll also have a temper when you wake up, right? Xian Huang. Fuck, I'll be a fool if I believe you. This temper when you wake up almost killed my disciple and his group. Hey, we really can't interfere with this sacred beast. He's also very innocent, right? Tiandao wiped his old tears and acted cute as he discussed with Xian Huang. He was originally sleeping in the abyss of the sea. I'm afraid he might not wake up even after 1,000 years. However, someone with ulterior motives woke him up, and even sprinkled a berserk medicinal liquid on him. If he wakes up now, the first person he'll kill will definitely be the person who woke him up and sprinkled the medicinal liquid on him. You talk so much nonsense. What exactly do you want to say? Xian Huang angrily kicked Tiandao. Tiandao, I'm suffering in my heart. Hey, I want to say, those cultivators who came from the holy region, I can help your disciple to deal with them. But Tiandao's words took a turn. You also promised me that you won't interfere with that sacred beast. That sacred beast is also very innocent. So I have to fucking watch that human snake kill my disciple and his group? You have to believe in destiny. Tiandao raised his finger and pointed to the sky. How can your disciple be killed by a sacred beast? What kind of person is your disciple? You know I know, and even the heavens and earth know. Hey, little girls need to go through some training before they can blossom and bear fruit. Right? Scram! Xian Huang angrily punched Tiandao's eye. Tiandao's eye instantly swelled up. Fortunately, he was a formless, colorless, and shapeless person. He reached out to wipe his eye, and returned to his original appearance. You can't be so crude and violent. Tiandao was extremely angry. He extended his fist and heavily knocked on Xian Huang's head twice. This old man is discussing with you right now. Discussion. Don't fucking refuse a toast only to drink a forfeit. Xian Huang! Exclamation point. I'll drink as punishment. I'll drink as punishment. Fucking drink as punishment. Just as Tiandao's voice fell, Xian Huang transformed into a terrifying Tyrannosaurus. She lifted Tiandao and threw him left and right, punching and kicking him. Old bastard, quickly remove the heavenly lock on my body. Otherwise I'll tear your sky apart. Ow, ah. Aya. Don't hit me. Don't hit me. Don't hit me anymore. Xian Huang's temper flared up. Regardless of whether the person in front of her was the heavenly Tao or not, she would beat him up first. Fortunately, this fellow was still bound by hundreds and thousands of invisible heavenly locks by the heavenly Tao. His movements were not that nimble after being beaten up. Heavenly Tao wailed pitifully a few times and scrambled away from the Tyrannosaurus. Xian Huang, let me tell you, don't think that you can be so disrespectful to me just because I dote on you. Don't come over. Tiandao widened his eyes and stretched out a hand to block in front of Xian Huang. Okay. You tell me, what should I do? As long as you don't bring Niti in here to cause trouble and kill that sacred beast, I will promise you anything. Chapter 4739. Is this holy beast your relative? Xian Huang looked at Tian Dao in confusion. This guy didn't seem like someone who liked to be kind. 800 years ago, there was some history, the heavenly Dao said hesitantly. Xian Huang's eyes immediately changed. With a rich expression, she sized up Tian Dao from head to toe. The corners of her mouth couldn't help but curl up slightly. You and him? Well, what? Tian Dao looked at this guy's expression and immediately felt a chill down his spine. Put away your messy thoughts. Heavenly Dao was so angry that he was jumping up and down. We are not in the relationship you think we are. Xian Huang winked at the little old man. I understand. You understand my ass. Tian Dao was so angry that he pulled her sleeve. Let's go and find those 13 old fellows to settle the score. They came uninvited and don't even want to live such a good life in the Holy Land. Xian Huang looked at him expressionlessly. I heard you mention it last time. Aren't the days of the sacred domain rather poor and desolate? It's said that you don't even have a cup of tea to drink. What poor? Tian Dao stared at Xian Huang in disbelief. I'm doing this for their own good. They have already entered the transcendent God realm. In order to reach a higher level, shouldn't they work harder than anyone else? Drink what tea? Eat what rice? These are all people in the transcendent God realm. Usually they eat a nutrition pill every year and a half. It's simple and easy, and it doesn't consume time, right? You don't know what the Holy Land is like, so don't blindly comment. Xian Huang. Why did the people in the Holy Land feel so miserable? They had already risen to such a realm. So why couldn't they even eat hot soup and hot rice? Then what was the use of reaching the large success stage? Didn't they just want to live a better life? Tian Dao saw that her expression was indescribable, and immediately snorted unhappily. What do you know? You only know how to eat all day. That brat of yours is now a deity realm cultivator. So what if he doesn't eat for 3 or 2 months? He ate every day, every meal, and 3 meals a day. I learned everything from you too. You don't want to learn anything good, but you want to learn these useless things. Xian Huang glanced at him mysteriously. Tian Dao, could it be that because of you I can't taste anything? Every time I see other people eating and showing a happy expression, I feel especially bitter in my heart. That's why they made the rule that people in the Saint Domain can't even drink tea, right? Release. Bullshit. Xian Huang shook her finger and nodded secretly. I must be telling the truth. Scram. The heavenly Dao roared in annoyance. Then, it rolled on the clouds and angrily headed toward the sea. At this moment, the 13 Saint Domain elders still didn't know that they were facing imminent danger. At this moment, they were imprisoning more than 20,000 elites of the 3 continents within their own defensive walls, using their pressure to oppress little Tai Sui, Thin Monk and the others. When Heavenly Dao rushed over, he happened to see this scene. He was so angry that his bun-like face scrunched up. How preposterous. He told them to cultivate properly in the Holy Land, but they came to the river of forgetfulness to abuse their power. A bunch of reckless things. Although Xian Huang was pulled over by the Heavenly Dao, her attention was still on her little disciple. Chapter 4740. At the same time, Arbor saw that inside the defensive wall set up by Emolian, the 3 figures floating in the air suddenly moved. The snake man was the first to let out a howl. With a wave of his hand, thousands of blue waves turned into countless water spirit blades, sweeping towards Emolian and He Chun. The defensive wall was instantly shattered. Arbor's little face was bone-chillingly cold. He anxiously rushed to Emolian's side. The humanoid sacred beast seemed to have sensed something and turned his head. Seeing Arbor holding the Fushi greatsword coming at him, his eyes couldn't help but shrink. He had already experienced the power of the sacred weapon just now. Now there was still a terrible pain in his tailbone. When he saw the Fushi greatsword, there was only one thought in his mind. I can't let this sword fall on me again. I can't let the little girl use the Fushi greatsword to cut me again. I feel that the Fushi greatsword's power is far more than this. Arbor's sword light flashed, his little face full of hostility. When the sword fell on his head, the ground suddenly shook violently. The upper body of the snake man in front of him expanded by several feet. With a wave of his hands, The glaciers in the underwater abyss actually shattered in an instant. Like the explosion of a star, countless ice dots came straight at him. Emolien's eyes shrank. He hurriedly tore open space and quickly moved to Arbor's side, blocking this fierce attack for him. His body swayed a few times. Arbor hurriedly reached out. Just as he was about to support his body, he suddenly felt a suction force suddenly lifting his whole body up. Looking carefully, it turned out that it was because Emolien's body was suddenly rolled up by the snake man's tail. And because he was firmly holding on to Emolien's arm, he was also dragged towards the entrance of the underwater abyss, where the snake man was standing. Arbor's eyes flashed with a trace of fury. Hanging on to Emolien's body, he whispered in her ear, "I'll send all of you into the star domain later. I'll explode a nameless star. The shock force may cause the star domain to be unstable. But don't be nervous. Wuxia will." Before he finished speaking, he felt his whole body being pulled down rapidly. At the entrance of the underwater abyss, the bottomless ice cave was like a monster opening its huge mouth, biting towards the two of them. At first, the snake man only wanted to suck Emolien into the underwater abyss. He didn't want to go in together. It wasn't easy to escape from Emolien's ancient Emolien realm. The snake man had a trace of fear of this kid in front of him. He only wanted to trick Emolien. But then he found that things were out of his control. There was an irresistible natural suction force in the abyss. Once a person entered the ice cave, they would be pulled down involuntarily. There was no way to resist that force. While the humanoid divine beast was stunned, he couldn't help but be at his wit's end. At this moment, a pure white color appeared in Xiaomu's eyes. The entire world was now covered in the white light of the glacier. She reached out and hugged Emolien's neck tightly, a guarded expression on her face. Emolien couldn't help but feel a little helpless. He looked at her and said, "Jojo, we'll be together wherever we go." Arbor reached out and knocked him on the head. "You can't leave me behind again." "Okay, we'll go wherever you want." Emolien sighed helplessly, his voice gentle. Arbor's heart calmed down a little. As long as she was with Jojo's lotus, no matter how difficult the situation was, it could be resolved. "Jojo." Emolien reached out and stroked her hair. Chapter 47-41. Don't worry. Emolien smiled at her and stroked her cheek. "I will protect you." How could she not be worried? Arbor stared at Emolien, who was just inches away from her, with a guarded expression. "If you abandon me again, I will never pay attention to you again." "Okay, I'll do as you say, I'll do as you say." His gaze lingered on her face for a split second, and his phoenix eyes flickered as if there were starlight swimming in them. Arbor hung on to him, and breathed a sigh of relief in her heart when she heard him say this. It was fine as long as this guy didn't abandon her. In any case, she would follow him wherever he went. This ice cave in the underwater abyss was like a bottomless pit. After the two of them fell for a long time, they could only hear the sound of wind whistling by their ears. White light flickered before their eyes, and they couldn't see their surroundings clearly at all. The little stoic wanted to move her head, but she suddenly felt a strange pain assault her. Her conscience was violently shaken, and her entire body couldn't help but stiffen. Emolien took in all of her abnormality. He raised his hand to press down on her head, his tone still gentle as he said, "Xiao, your soul isn't very stable. Forcing yourself in will cause fatal damage to your conscious pool. You've absorbed the power of deprivation in this underwater abyss, but the remaining mysterious power has the effect of divine sense attacks. This power will cause space to tear and become unstable. You should have felt it. The divine sense attacks surging from all directions will injure your conscience. You won't be able to withstand it in your current state." Arbor covered his mouth with her hand and glared at him with her round eyes. "I'm not leaving." Her heart started beating wildly for some reason. However, Emolien smiled gently at her and pulled down her small hand, rubbing his lips against her palm. "Jojo's conscience might be strong, but your soul isn't stable. If you continue to force yourself like this, it will cause great harm to you. I can't watch you get hurt," he whispered next to her ear. "Let's make a promise, okay? I will come find you. This seabed abyss can't trap me. Even the Tower of Punishment couldn't trap me, let alone this place." Swindler Qiao Mu was extremely flustered. She clutched his clothes with both hands and glared at him with her round eyes. What do you want to do? I won't leave. I won't leave you. Jojo, listen to me. I won't listen. After I deal with that stinky snake, I'll catch him and give him to you. I don't want anything. I want you to stay by my side. Arbor had a bad feeling, because Emo Lien was holding her waist with one hand, and an irresistible force was being emitted from his body. He was going to throw her out. Emo Lien. She felt an immense sense of panic. It was different from the time when she was captured in the Tower of Punishment. That time, she knew that Emo Lien had been captured by the heavenly axiom to be punished. There was always a chance for her to escape. But this time, it wasn't as simple as it seemed. In this seabed abyss, she didn't know what kind of danger was waiting for him. The sacrificial sea abyss was able to trap that human-shaped sacred beast for so many years. How would she know if it would trap Emo Lien as well? She couldn't afford to gamble, and didn't want to gamble. She only wanted to be by his side wherever they went. However, how could Emo Lien just watch as she became a target and suffered the attacks of the mysterious power in the seabed abyss? If her conscience couldn't withstand it, then he couldn't either. Don't be afraid, Emo Lien whispered in her ear. Chapter 47-42. I'll send you up. Just follow the path and keep going forward. Do you still remember the star I gave you? If the path is too dark, take out the star and shine it on it. Although I'm not by your side, my heart will definitely accompany you all the way out. I don't want it. Arbor hung onto him tightly. She hugged his neck and shouted anxiously and angrily. I don't want it. She didn't want to leave his side at all. No. Emo Lien lowered his head and kissed her heavily on the lips. Then, without waiting for her to refute, he immediately sent her soft body up. Arbor's eyes widened slightly. She felt an irresistible push coming from below her waist. Emo Lien said he was going to send her up. How could she resist? That huge force instantly pushed her away from his side. The last thing Arbor saw was Emo Lien's rapidly sinking figure. At the same time that he used the force to send her up, his body accelerated and slid down in the opposite direction. This big liar. He tricked Lord Jojo again. Arbor followed Emo Lien's pushing force and rose up involuntarily. This pushing force lasted for a quarter of an hour before it slowly disappeared. Arbor's figure didn't fall down. Instead, she stopped in midair. It was pitch black in front of her. She couldn't see the way out. Arbor didn't even think and jumped down. As a result, her body crashed into something with a dong sound. She raised her hand to touch it. It felt like something intertwined with green vines below her. She hurriedly reached out and hammered it a few times. She couldn't move it at all. Maybe it would be better if she took out a divine hammer and hammered it. Arbor hurriedly reached out to take something out of her inner world. This time, she discovered that because she had been attacked by the mysterious power of the underground abyss before, her conscience was still unstable. She couldn't even open her inner world. Arbor unfolded a wisp of blue spiritual fire in her hand. She wanted to burn a hole in the vines below her. However, after burning for a long time, he touched it and found that it was still a crisscrossing mess. His little bit of fire was not enough to burn the things that covered the ground below him. The little stoic walked dejectedly in the darkness for a while, feeling like she had landed on a circular platform. Since she couldn't go down, she could only continue to go up and see if she could think of another way to go down. Arbor's body gently leaped upwards without any hindrance. When his fingers touched an icicle, Arbor subconsciously climbed up. His body gently landed on the protruding icicle and took 2 deep breaths. His head hurt terribly, and he felt weak all over. At the bottom of the seabed abyss, he was indeed injured by that divine sense attack. The little guy took out a storage talisman from his sleeve and wanted to take out a luminous pearl. But after trying for a long time and finding that it was useless, he couldn't help but feel a little anxious. In the abyss of the sacrificial sea, even storage talismans couldn't be used? In the past, when she went out to train, she had never been as miserable as she was now. The surroundings were too cold, and she felt a bit cold. Standing on that protruding icicle, she felt a bit drowsy. I still have to find Jojo's lotus, Arbor muttered in his mind. He curled up his body and leaned against the cool ice wall. That icy touch couldn't extinguish the anxiety and worry in his heart. His body suddenly moved as he recalled what Emolien said to him earlier. Do you remember the star I gave you? Chapter 47-43. Why did he say this? Was it because he already knew that her conscience was severely shaken, and that she couldn't use her divine conscience, or even talisman energy for the time being? A heart? That's right. Emolien gave her a star on her birthday at the Royal Academy. Her pentagram necklace. Arbor pulled out a silver necklace from around her neck and held it in her palm. The pendant of the necklace was a pale pentagram, and the soul-calming frost jade was also hanging from it. The moon-shaped jade pendant circulated with a faint luster, reflecting the splendor of the stars beside it. The stars accompanied the moon, and the moon reflected the stars. Arbor's fingers gently caressed this star and moon. As soon as she let go, that aqua-silver pentagram leaped up in front of her eyes and emitted a gentle light. The pitch-black darkness in front of her was instantly dispersed by the light. Tiny mimicry stars leaped up everywhere, instantly illuminating this area with incomparable splendor. The little stoic reflexively closed her eyes. When she opened them again, she could clearly see the landscape of this place. Sure enough, she was standing on an ice prism, protruding horizontally from the ice wall. All around her were ice boulders and ice walls. She couldn't see the end of the ceiling, and not far below her, countless old vines and vines had sealed off her path. Arbor's heart thumped fiercely. She suddenly scooped up the pentagram next to her and leaped down, landing in that area of interwoven vines again. Rotten peach blossom, Arbor suddenly shouted loudly, and pounded on the path sealed by the wood spirit twice. She couldn't go down. The venerable peach blossom immortal had used countless layers of wood spirit seals to seal off her path. Even if she was at her peak, she couldn't open a seal set up by a venerable immortal, let alone now when her body was on the verge of collapse. A sense of powerlessness welled up in her heart. The most frightening thing was that when she was sent up by Emolien's force just now, she should have brushed past rotten peach blossom in the pitch-black cave. After she was thrown up by that force, rotten peach blossom set up layer after layer of wood spirit seals on her path, completely sealing off her path down. The two of them didn't even discuss it with her and acted on their own accord. They even cooperated with each other decisively and perfectly, leaving her in this mediocre place. Scoundrel! Scoundrel! Arbor patted the seal with reddened eyes and muttered, Emolien, rotten peach blossom, where did you go? Emolien, rotten peach blossom, get back here. She used her fingers to dig at the old vine that was as hard as iron. She sat there in a daze for a while before muttering to herself, I'm going up now. I'm going up to look for someone. I can't open this with spirit seal, but little Taisui and the others should be able to. Yes, find little Taisui and the others. Arbor jumped up, holding a star in his hand and shining it above. She didn't know how long it had been since she fell into the bottomless pit of the sacrificial sea. Now when she looked up, she could see no light at the mouth of the cave, as if all the light had disappeared at the bottom of the icy cavern. Damned heavenly Tao, if anything happens to my disciple, I'll use your dog life to pay for it. You clearly know that she can't possibly be in any danger. Heavenly Tao rolled his eyes anthropomorphized. He put his hands on his hips and stood in front of Xian Huang. His little body was straight, and his little face was filled with solemnity. Life requires experience. If you don't experience it, how can you become stronger? In the past, when you went out for experience, didn't you go through so many difficulties and hardships? Chapter 47-44. Isn't the reason why you reached this height today because you can face any difficulties and hardships? A strict teacher produces a brilliant disciple. Xian Huang was silent for a moment, and in the next second, she kicked Tian Dao away. It was true, but she could say such big words to other people's children. But she couldn't stand it when she saw her own child suffer. Tian Dao saw her turn and go in the direction of the sacrificial sea abyss, and couldn't help but sigh sadly. Getting up and brushing off the non-existent dust on his body, Tian Dao's face was faintly sad, As long as Xianhuang doesn't smash the sacrificial sea abyss and destroy any space in this realm, then no matter what she does, I can turn a blind eye to it. Tian Dao didn't want to pay attention to Xianhuang at all. She turned her head and revealed the face of a young woman, glaring at the 13 sanctuary elders who were like quails. At this time, little Tai Sui and the others could also breathe a sigh of relief. Everyone was more or less injured. The injuries on Thin Monk's body were the most frightening. There was a sword wound on his back that was so deep that his bones could be seen. The Peony Fairy was pursing her lips and applying ointment for Thin Monk with a cold face. Her cold eyes swept over the 13 elders who kept their mouths shut from time to time. Do you know your crime? Tian Dao changed his cute and cowardly appearance in front of Xianhuang and put on a serious face and questioned coldly, who allowed you to make your own decisions and secretly come to the Forgotten River realm? So many of you transcendent realms have come over. Have you greeted this old man? One of the Forgotten River elders said boldly. We didn't come here on our own. We were summoned here. Yes, just like the God-inviting talisman, we abided by the laws of the heavenly Tao. We. Ha! Tian Dao snorted coldly. With a raise of his hand, a purple-red lightning turned into a whip shadow and tightly wrapped around the neck of the Transcendence Elder. Little Tai Sui and the others were shocked and looked in the direction of Tian Dao. At this moment, they were also feeling a little uneasy. Unfortunately, they were also a group of Transcendent Realm experts. What was even more unfortunate was that they were a group of Transcendent Realm experts who had escaped from the Punishment Tower. If even Transcendence could not come to this continent, strictly speaking, they should have ascended to the Holy Realm long ago. How dare you quibble with me? Tian Dao put one hand on his waist and made the shape of a teapot. He glared at the 13 sanctuary elders and reprimanded them, as if he expected better from them. Your trip here has already caused instability in the Forgotten River realm. It's completely against the rules of the Heavenly Tao. The secret technique you're using is a sinister technique left behind by the Dragon Clan of Forgetfulness to summon their ancestors. It can't be considered a proper deity-inviting talisman. The God-inviting talisman can only summon one saint-level cultivator at a time. What about you? You guys came in a group the moment you came. Who the hell could stand it? With so many transcendent realms coming, it's impossible for me to turn a blind eye to it. The elder who had the lightning whip wrapped around his neck wanted to push the whip away in fear, but he could not do so for a long time. Venerable one, the elder stammered. We know our mistakes now. Please let go of me. I swear that for the rest of my life, I will never interfere in the affairs of the juniors of the Forgotten River again. I will never step into the Forgotten River again. It's too late. Chapter 47-45. You trespassed into the Wangchuan realm and caused the realm here to become unstable. You must bear the consequences, Heavenly Tao said coldly with an ugly expression. The serious expression on this fellow's face made everyone's heart beat like a drum. There was a world of difference between the mental state of the 13 elders from the sanctuary and the mental state they were in now. The more arrogant they were before, the more cowardly they were now at their current position. As long as they didn't court death, they wouldn't die. But now, from the looks of it, the Heavenly Tao wanted to punish them. Who wouldn't panic? The elder whose neck was wrapped by the lightning whip hurriedly took a few steps back and begged for mercy with a bitter expression. Supremacy, please forgive us. We were really summoned here by someone. If we were wrong, we were just careless. Splash. Long Shangyun and Long Huan emerged from the bottom of the sea one after another and saw the confrontation between the two sides. Long Shangyun's heart skipped a beat. She put down the coffin she was carrying with one hand and pinched Long Huan with the other, using her eyes to tell him not to spout nonsense later. Heavenly Tao's small body was standing in the air. Opposite him were 13 elders standing in a row like quails. Little Tai Sui, Dao Wuji, and the others were all healing their injuries. When they heard the commotion, they hurriedly turned to look. When they saw that only Long Shangyun and Long Huan came out, disappointment flashed through their eyes. Recover quickly. Come down with me to see what's going on. Little Taisui said to Dao Wuji, a hint of worry lingering in his heart. To be honest, the trembling of the earth and mountains below was truly worrisome. He wondered how Jojo and the venerable Peach Blossom Immortal were doing. The latter's cheeky expression changed, and he nodded at him with a serious expression. Yes. Supremacy. The sanctuary elder turned and saw Long Shangyun and Long Huan. His face tightened, and he hurriedly called out to them. Where's your grandmother? Let Long Qian come out and explain. Supremacy. We did cross the boundary this time, but there's a reason for this. We were also deceived. I thought that the secret summoning technique that Dragon Clan leader used was just like the god-descending talisman. It was within the scope of the Heavenly Tao's permission. Long Shangyun's eyes flickered as she stared coldly at the elder in front of her. With an indifferent expression, she said, Elder, are you trying to push all the blame onto our clan leader? Useless things. So many people came, but they still couldn't solve the problem of Arbor. Only now did she truly regret that she had summoned this group of useless trash to the river of forgetfulness. Not only did she tire herself out, she had also caused her own body to be destroyed. Now, she could only possess another body to be reborn. Her granddaughter's body simply couldn't withstand her powerful divine soul. In less than 2 hours, her body would directly collapse. By then, if her soul could not be reborn from a new body, it would turn into ashes. This was obviously not what Long Qian wanted to see. Where is Long Qian? Ask her to come out and explain herself. That elder said angrily. In fact, it was indeed her who used a secret technique to summon us here. Wasn't it? Now that something like this had happened, and even the Heavenly Tao had been alerted, someone had to take responsibility for this. There was no other person other than Long Qian. Long Shangyun's face contorted slightly. Before Long Huan could speak, she fiercely grabbed his hand. Chapter 47-46. Long Shangyun said sternly, Clan leader Long has died in the abyss. What? Impossible. Clan leader Long really died in the abyss of the sacrificial sea? Little Taisui and the others looked at Long Shangyun in confusion and frowned. How could Long Qian die so easily? Little Taisui and the others didn't quite believe it. Long Qian looked like a scheming person who could even plot against her own daughter and granddaughter. She didn't look like someone who would die in the sea. Besides, Jojo and the others hadn't come out after so long. But Long Shangyun and Long Qian had come back up. This made little Taisui and the others feel even more uneasy. The peony fairy swallowed a pill and looked at Long Shangyun and Long Qian coldly. Where's Jojo? Long Shangyun said coldly. Mu Qiao has fallen into the abyss. She can't come back up. So what was the point of her gathering so many elite disciples of the duo clan of Wangshuan, and specially summoning the 13 elders of the sanctuary? In the end, it was all because of her Long Qian, who used a secret technique to awaken the humanoid sacred beast in the abyss. Only then did she get rid of that troublesome guy in Arbor. So what was the point of her scheming and painstaking efforts to get these useless people to come to Wangshuan? They couldn't help at all. Not only that, but they also wanted her to take the blame and bear the wrath of the Heavenly Tao. What a whimsical idea. Little Taisui's eyes narrowed. He stood up and glared at Long Shangyun. Who are you? You're not Long Shangyun. Long Shangyun was stunned. Long Qian was also shocked. He didn't expect that the little celestial, who was always by Jojo's side and didn't speak much, could recognize that Long Shangyun wasn't the real Long Shangyun. Long Qian, you took over your own granddaughter's body? Little Taisui looked at Long Qian in shock, his eyes filled with confusion. This woman was indeed a ruthless woman. Not only was she heartless to her own granddaughter, she was even ruthless to her own granddaughter. No wonder Long Shangyun's face was as pale as a dead person. Long Shangyun wouldn't be able to withstand Long Qian's powerful spiritual soul. She would kill her granddaughter with her own hands. Grandmother. Long Yin finally could not hold back his tears as he cried out miserably. I beg you, quickly come out of Xiang Yun's body. She can't hold on any longer. Long Qian was furious. 1 by 1, 2 by 3, all of them wanted to go against her. He really wished that a bolt of lightning would descend from the sky and strike these unfilial grandsons and granddaughters to death. Boom! Thunder roared. Long Qian's entire body tensed up. She raised her hand and threw something out, blocking the lightning that was falling from the sky. With a loud crack, the lightning struck the item that Long Qian had thrown out and split it apart. Only then did everyone see clearly that it was a top-notch coffin. However, at this moment, the coffin had already been split open by the power of the heavenly lightning. A young woman rolled out from within and landed heavily on the ground with her face facing the ground. Sister Shuiyuan, Long Qian's shrill voice echoed in everyone's ears. The woman who was lying on the ground was covered by the power of lightning that was as thin as a snake. Her entire body was slowly being torn apart by the power of the lightning. A terrifying scene played out in front of everyone. It turned out that at the critical moment, the old woman felt that the heavenly lightning was about to strike her body, so she kicked. Chapter 47:47. She immediately kicked Long Shuyuan's coffin away. At such a critical moment, Long Qian didn't have time to think about it. Her brain immediately reacted. She used Long Shuyuan to block the attack. After a few minutes, Long Shuyuan's body was torn to pieces by the lightning. His soul was shattered into pieces, and he couldn't be reassembled no matter what. Long Qian was stunned for a moment before he turned to Long Qian and shouted, "Grandmother! You!" She said that she wanted to find the 10,000-year-old mermaid pearl to repair Long Shuyuan. In the end, it was all an excuse. When she kicked Long Shuyuan out to block the lightning, why didn't she think that Long Shuyuan was the future hope of the River of Forgetfulness? When she sent Long Shuyuan to his death, why didn't she think about Long Shuyuan's contributions to the River of Forgetfulness? Who did Long Shuyuan offend? Even after death, he couldn't rest in peace, and was struck by lightning until he turned into ashes. At this moment, her grandmother didn't feel bad for the River of Forgetfulness for losing a great prophet and a cultivator with great talent. Long Qian's expression was a little awkward as she raised her head and looked at Tian Dao vigilantly. If Tian Dao hadn't attacked her without any explanation, she wouldn't have subconsciously kicked Long Shuyuan's coffin out to block it. How could she be blamed for this? This was an instinctive action, okay? Little Tai Sui looked at the old lady with disdain. "You're too disgusting." At this moment, the 13th elder also reacted. He quickly pointed at Long Qian and said, "Venerable one, it's her. She summoned us." Tian Dao only looked at them coldly. "You are the main culprits and she is an accomplice. She will also be punished by Tian Dao." The 13 elders' expressions changed at the same time. Two of the elders hurriedly turned around and fled into the distance. Their speed was very fast. In just a moment, everyone saw two small black dots on the sea as they shot away. Tian Dao didn't even bat an eyelid. It was formless, colorless, and tasteless. Anything in the world could be him and not him. Any drop of water in the sea could be him and not him. This was Tian Dao. These two elders were too laughable. Escape? Where could they escape to? Where did they belong? The heavenly Dao looked down on them coldly and said solemnly, "According to the rules of the heavenly Dao, this sovereign will punish you with 99 bolts of heavenly thunder. Those who can withstand the 99 bolts of lightning and maintain their undying bodies will be considered to have overcome this tribulation. I won't pursue this matter in the future." The faces of the Saint Domain elders turned ashen, their faces ashen. 99 heavenly thunders? Back then, during the 5 spirits' reincarnation, the heavenly thunder would at most strike down 9 times before stopping. At that time, they were struck to the point where they were on the brink of death, vomiting blood incessantly, losing more than half of their lives. But now the heavenly Dao actually said that it would send down 99 lightning punishments. Not everyone could be like Arbor, who could withstand the lightning bolts and jump around. Not everyone could be like Jojo and be tolerated by the heavenly axiom over and over again, who had the ability to withstand 99 bolts of heavenly lightning tribulation without dying. It wasn't like he had an indestructible body made of iron. Even if they had risen to the transcendent realm now, they were still humans. Boom! A soul-shaking sound of thunder came from afar. In the blink of an eye, bolts of heavenly lightning struck the surface of the sea one after another, producing loud sounds. Tian Dao looked expressionlessly at the elders whose faces were ashen. With a flick of his finger, the two elders who had already flown far away were like chicks who had been grabbed by the back of their necks. Chapter 47-48. It was as if an invisible palm had pulled them all the way back from afar and flung them heavily to the ground. The heavenly lightning halos circled around the two of them. Everyone looked down and saw the sizzling power of lightning circling around the two of them, gradually climbing up to their necks. Suddenly, it rushed towards their faces. It was as if a lightning bolt had opened up on their faces, creating a long crack. The two elders' faces cracked from their chins to their foreheads. It was a tragic sight. Everyone silently looked away. They were shocked to find that Tian Dao was incomparably cruel. Although he acted cute on the outside, they did not expect him to be so ruthless. When he taught people a lesson, it was really impossible to guard against him. When the other elders of the sanctuary saw this, they were so frightened that their faces turned pale. At this moment, they were extremely regretful. Why did they listen to Long Qian's summons and come down to the river of forgetfulness from the sanctuary? If they continued to stay in the sacred region, diligently practicing their martial arts, and diligently cultivating their realms, then it would be impossible for an accident to offend Tian Dao in 10,000 years. Now everyone was in a difficult position and regretted their actions. When Xian Huang found her beloved disciple, this little fellow was struggling to climb up. Master! When Arbor saw her, her eyes lit up. Xiaobao, don't worry. Master will bring you out now. Her gaze suddenly fell on her hand. You took back Fuxi? Arbor nodded. Her body had reached its limit and could not support the power of the Fuxi sword. She had already taken it back. Xiaobao, your soul. Xiaomu didn't wait for Xian Huang to finish reciting before flying to her side and shaking her arm forcefully. Master, Rotten Peach Blossom has set up a seal barrier below. Can you help me remove it? Xian Huang looked at her little disciple's expression and could not help but feel uneasy. His little disciple's face was as calm as water, but the anxiety in his eyes couldn't lie. She was burning with anxiety. Xian Huang nodded and followed her to the wood spirit seal wall. While unlocking the seal, she consoled her little disciple. Xiaobao, the natural suction force in the abyss under the sea is not something that one or two people can deal with. You don't have to blame yourself. Arbor nodded and lowered his little head, his eyes fixed on the wood spirit seal that his master had opened. It had been opened. A crack had been created in the seal by his master's sword. From the center of this crack, countless spiderweb-like cracks appeared, shattering the entire seal in a matter of minutes. Such tyrannical power! Arbor took a deep breath and looked down. Even though she had mentally prepared herself, when she looked down and saw a bottomless ice reflected in her eyes, the little stoic's heart still crumbled. Nothing. There was nothing left. The rotten peach blossom and Jojo's lotus were gone. Who knew if they had gone down tens of thousands of meters? In any case, with her eyesight, she couldn't see the end of this ice cave. Little treasure. Xian Huang called out to her worriedly. This fellow's eyes were vigilant, ready to prevent the little fellow from jumping down if she took things too hard. Arbor looked up and forced a smile at Xian Huang. That smile was as ugly as a wooden carving, as if a strange mark had been carved on a wooden face. Xian Huang's heart tightened, and she reflexively grabbed Arbor. Little treasure, don't worry. Wait here. Master will go down and see what's going on. Chapter 47-49. Arbor nodded obediently. Okay. Xian Huang was truly worried when she saw that her condition wasn't good. She squeezed her small hand and said, How about you go to the surface first and wait for Master? Xian Huang looked at this child's expressionless face and knew that her heart was in turmoil. She absolutely couldn't be as calm and peaceful as she appeared on the surface. When she thought of Heavenly Law's many obstructions just now, and then looked at her little disciple's expression, she really wished she could drag Heavenly Law over and give it a good beating. Those little friends of yours are all waiting for you up there. The little stoic was silent for a moment before peeking at her master. When Xian Huang saw this, she patted her head. Don't worry. Although this abyss of the sacrificial sea is bottomless, It can't hurt your master. Come, I'll send you up first. Xian Huang pulled Arbor's hand. Arbor instantly felt a tremendous force coming from below her, and she involuntarily flew up with her master. It felt like she was flying, but it also felt like she was tearing apart space bit by bit and teleporting over. Xian Huang was extremely fast. In a flash, she sent Arbor to the glacier entrance of the sacrificial sea abyss. Due to the huge earthquake, just now, the glacier at the cave entrance had completely collapsed. Xian Huang shattered the ice that blocked their way, and pulled the little stoic out of the cave entrance. Only then did the little stoic realize that the seawater only lingered around the sacrificial sea abyss, and didn't pour into the cave entrance at all. Thus, she couldn't see a single drop of water below the glacier. Child, Xian Huang rubbed the little stoic's head and exhorted softly, swim up. Master will go down to take a look. I'll come up to find you soon. The little stoic nodded obediently again. She stared at Xian Huang's figure diving into the sacrificial sea abyss for a while before turning around and following the current to swim up to the surface. At this time, the seawater had already recovered its ice-cold temperature and was no longer shockingly scalding. Perhaps it was because the glacier emerged from the bottom of the sacrificial sea abyss, but the temperature of the seawater here was much lower than the surrounding currents. A trace of coolness lingered in Arbor's heart, but it couldn't suppress the fire in her heart that flared up. Long Qian. Today's matter was fundamentally caused by this deranged old woman. What kind of hatred did this old woman have for her to be so eager for her to die? In order to deal with her, he even went as far as to summon the freakish holy beast of the undersea abyss. Just to kill her in one fell swoop? A cold light flashed in Arbor's eyes. He kicked his legs and quickly swam towards the surface of the sea. 13 elders from the sacred region. 2 of them were captured by the heavenly Tao during their escape, and were destroyed by humanity. As for the other 11 elders, they were currently suffering a fate worse than death. They had no idea how many bolts of heavenly lightning there were. Their flesh was torn, and their bodies were charred black. They were locked in a realm by the heavenly Tao, and could only endure the bolts of heavenly lightning. 28. Long Shi shuddered and counted in his heart. Among them, 2 elders had already fainted on the ground. However, the heavenly thunder would not sympathize with the elder who had fainted. They continued to strike the 2 pitiful fellows who had fainted on the ground, until their bodies were riddled with holes, and could no longer be repaired. Only then did they beat the gong to retreat. Long Qian's eyes flickered as she stood there. She stealthily took a step back, then another step back. Chapter 4750. If she didn't run now, when would she? Looking at the aggressive manner of the heavenly Tao, could it be that after settling the score with these elders, it would immediately look for him? Long Qian couldn't help but tremble when she saw the miserable state of the 13 elders after being struck by lightning. She could feel that Long Shangyun's body was on the verge of collapsing. It seemed like she had to find a chance to leave this place and find a suitable body before Long Qian turned around and was about to leave. But she met a pair of dark, cold eyes the moment she turned around. Xiaomu just so happened to emerge from the seawater, and she immediately saw Long Shangyun facing her, her eyes filled with astonishment. This old woman used Long Shangyun's face to make such an expression. It was really disgusting. Get out of her body. Xiaomu swam a distance in the sea before sensing that her divine conscience had returned by quite a bit. He took out a few attack talismans from his inner world and threw them at Long Shangyun without thinking. Now that he thought about it, there must be something wrong with the abyss of the sacrificial sea. That was why he felt his consciousness tremble when he fell into the bottomless glacier. Arbor took a deep breath and stared coldly at the person in front of him. Long Shangyun's body was Long Qian's soul. This old woman was now staring at Arbor with a twisted expression. It was as if she didn't expect Arbor to be able to climb out of the abyss at the bottom of the sea. This girl was really like a ghost. As Long Qian thought this, her gaze toward Xiaomu became increasingly bizarre and twisted. How did you get out of there? Long Qian couldn't help but ask. Her voice was so sharp that everyone couldn't help but turn to look at her. Little Tai Sui and the others were originally paying attention to the elders who were suffering from the lightning tribulation. When they heard the conversation between Arbor and Long Qian, they were all delighted. Jojo was out, so they knew that their Jojo would be fine. Now, she only looked a little pale, and didn't seem to be injured. Little Taisui quickly went to Arbor's side, and looked up with a serious face. "How are you?" Xiaomu looked down at him and shook her head, indicating that she was fine. Heavenly Dao also caught sight of the little stoic. This fellow looked behind her, and didn't see Xian Huang, so his brows couldn't help but crease. He opened his mouth and asked seriously, "Where's Xian Huang? Why didn't she come with you?" Arbor didn't even look at him, as if he couldn't be bothered with him. The Heavenly Dao could not help but feel a little stifled. He muttered to himself, "I'm so good to the little girl, but she still doesn't like me. I don't know why." "Little Taisui, take them to a place a little farther away," Arbor whispered to Little Taisui. He raised his hand and pushed Little Taisui lightly. Little Taisui's heart skipped a beat, and he immediately reacted. He turned his head to look around Arbor and subconsciously asked, "Why aren't your Lotus and Peach Blossom here?" Normally, when Lianhua and Lianhua heard Little Taisui call them that, they would have jumped up and chased after him to beat him up. Now that he had been muttering to himself for a long time, other than noticing that the little stoic's expression was becoming more and more unsightly, he didn't see these two fellows. "They'll be fine." Little Taisui immediately realized that he shouldn't have asked, and hastily comforted him. "Don't worry. I'll go down with Endless Blade later to see what's going on." Chapter 4751. Arbor gently nudged his small body again, and used her eyes to signal for Little Taisui and the others to move further away. It was time to settle this muddled debt with Long Qian. Arbor pursed her lips and remained silent. Her body hovered above the sea, and her icy gaze met Long Qian's trembling gaze. Then, she raised her hands slightly. At first, everyone couldn't react in time. Then, a disciple of the Wangchuan duo clan exclaimed, "See waves! The waves are rising!" Everyone turned their heads to look. Only then did they discover that on the distant horizon, a monstrous wave was rolling up to a height of several hundred feet. The stormy wave was sweeping towards them at a rather terrifying speed. The little stoic's ability to control the water spirit was truly shocking. What are you going to do?" Long Qian's heart trembled, and her pupils violently contracted. So this was Long Qian's daughter. Even if they searched the entire Wangchuan, they probably wouldn't be able to control the sea of Wangchuan to this extent. This Long Qian's daughter had mastered the power of the water spirit to the point of perfection. It was obvious that she could command the water spirit with a single breath, and use it completely. Young Master Ding stood at the back of the crowd. When he saw Arbor's actions, his eyes involuntarily flickered. The little girl was the type to seek revenge for the smallest grievance. Just like back then, when he made her mother faint as a joke, and then pretended to be her. It deeply infuriated this little stoic. She stabbed him in the chest like a knife. Now that Long Qian caused Emolien and He Shurchen to fall into the bottomless abyss at the same time, it was obvious that the little stoic wouldn't let the main culprit Long Qian off. This was truly courting death. Ding Yun nonchalantly curled his lips, and a faint smile flitted through his eyes. "What are you doing?" Long Qian watched as the monstrous wave came closer and closer to them, and a trace of fear involuntarily arose in her heart. This girl couldn't be thinking of summoning the power of the sea to punish the entire Wangchuan, right? Was this possible? Could she fight the entire Wangchuan realm with her strength alone? The head of the Wangchuan duo clan, Duo Chang, was so frightened that his legs turned to jelly, and he nearly fell to the ground. Looking at the huge wave in front of him, Duo Chang had a bad premonition that a disaster was about to befall him. What kind of stupid thing did he do with the Dragon Clan leader of the Forgotten River Dragon Clan? Duo Chang's face paled as he looked at the incoming wave. He hurriedly activated his defensive barrier and roared, "Get ready! What should I prepare?" As if they were facing a formidable foe, everyone activated their defensive equipment and waited for the instant the little stoic's torrential wave came crashing down. However, just as everyone was mentally prepared to give up, the monstrous wave suddenly stopped. The meandering wave drew an arc in the air and stopped right above everyone's heads. Some of the unlucky ones standing at the front could see a drop of water breaking away from the huge wave and slowly dripping down. Everyone's heart clenched tightly. It was like having a sharp sword hanging above their heads, and no one knew when it would fall. This was much more unbearable than falling behind already. The waves were suspended in mid-air, as if they were about to fall. The rolling waves stopped uniformly in front of everyone, making them feel a huge threat coming head-on. Long Qian's heart was about to jump out of her chest. She gaped and looked at Arbor dumbstruck. So this was the ultimate power of the 10,000-year-old mermaid pearl? It could control an entire body of water? It could raise monstrous waves so easily. Chapter 4752. Let's talk things out. Long Qian's heart thumped wildly. Heavenly Dao's eyelids also kept twitching, and he hastily stopped her. Little miss, don't act recklessly. Your master should be in the seabed abyss right now, right? It's not impossible to get these people back up. Arbor glanced at him coldly. Are you sure? Heavenly Dao was instantly terrified and couldn't utter a single word because of the little stoic. Of course, he couldn't guarantee that the natural suction of the sacrificial sea's abyss had already pulled those two brats to God knows where the bottom of the abyss was endless and connected to an unknown number of mysterious hidden spaces. Even Dark Phoenix, who could control the power of space, would find it difficult to find them within an hour. An hour later, he was going to kick Xianhuang back. Of course, this was only Heavenly Dao's wishful thinking. As for who would be kicked out in the end, Heavenly Dao himself didn't know either. The little stoic despised Heavenly Dao even more. She glared at him icily, causing Heavenly Dao's heart to feel stifled. He clearly cherished the little miss so much. So why was the little miss unwilling to give him the slightest bit of respect? Her husband had clearly reached the conditions to ascend to the holy domain long ago, but he turned a blind eye to their fooling all day long. Wasn't this friendly enough? Right now, he was merely changing her husband's training location. So why was the little miss so angry? Back at the Tower of Punishment, they could all break out of prison. A place like the seabed abyss should also be able to write. Look at little Tai Sui and the others. They were clearly the prison guards of the Tower of Punishment, but they could still break out of prison together with others. He already didn't settle old scores with them. So wasn't he being nice enough? Heavenly Dao felt indignant. He turned around and saw the little miss waving her small hand. The raging waves in front of everyone froze into ice inch by inch, freezing half of the sea surface at an extremely fast speed. By the time Heavenly Dao reacted, he discovered that the little miss had completely frozen the rolling waves. With a bang, they shattered into powder. Heavenly Dao couldn't help but shout, "Defend!" He was so anxious that his voice cracked when he called out. The members of the Forgetful River Dragon clan and the Duo clan all turned pale with fright. They hurriedly activated their second and third layer defensive spiritual artifacts in an attempt to block the oncoming frozen powder. His entire body had been turned into a sieve by the tiny ice lumps. Duo Chang hurriedly took out a large number of defensive spirit artifacts from his inner world and activated them one by one. His pupils contracted, and the fear he felt was indescribable. All of you stay here for me, the little stoic said coldly, her finger lightly pointing at the sky. Run! Long Qian finally understood what was going on. This stoic face was truly ruthless. She wanted to exterminate the remaining disciples of the River of Forgetfulness here. The originally dormant waves started rolling again, as if they were quickly lifted up by the power of her finger. They covered the sky and covered the earth as they chased after the crowd. Long Qian and the others jumped into the sea. As they swam, they couldn't help but look back. With just one glance, he could not move his eyes away. The water current behind them condensed into the shape of a transparent human figure. Arbor stood in front of this illusory figure formed by the water current and looked at Long Qian with an icy expression. With a tap of his finger, a large fushi sword materialized in the water illusion's hand and slashed at Long Qian's back. Chapter 4753. Well, what kind of godly skill is this? Everyone was shocked as they stared fearfully at the wave that had taken the shape of a human. The waves formed a huge shadow that covered the sky and the sun, blocking out the sunlight in front of everyone. Arbor stood in front of the shadow and pointed his finger at it. A Fushi sword appeared in the hand of the shadow, and it slashed towards Long Qian's back. Uffed. Long Qian was running for her life, but she couldn't avoid the shadow's attack. She thought that the little girl wouldn't be able to hurt her with her low-level divine realm cultivation. However, she forgot that this was Long Shangyun's body. With Long Shangyun's cultivation, there was no way she could block Arbor's attack. Her body fell forward into the sea. Long Qian spat out a mouthful of blood. Her body was soaked in cold water, and she shivered. Her soul was shaking, and her head was hurting. She couldn't hold it in. When she got out of the water, she spat out another mouthful of blood, and her face changed. Arbor looked at Long Qian, who was struggling in the water, expressionlessly. His eyes were filled with coldness. She and Long Qian were like fire and water. Their hatred was irreconcilable. If Long Qian still had some hope for Arbor in the beginning, as they got to know each other better, she no longer had any blood ties with Arbor. Forget about Arbor. Just look at how she treated Long Shangyun. She had watched her granddaughter grow up, and she took over Long Shangyun's body just like that. She didn't even care if Long Shangyun's body would break. This cold-blooded woman wouldn't do such a thing to her grandchild, even if she had any feelings for her grandchild. Get out of the way. Long Qian gestured at the mermen around him. Everyone did not need him to remind them. They hid wherever they could. Some sharp-witted mermen had already sunk into the water and fled for their lives back to their homeland. There was only one thought in everyone's mind: get away from this little fiend. The farther the better. He commanded the shadow formed by the waves and chased after Long Qian, who was trying to escape. Everyone's eyelids twitched. The shadow raised the sword in his hand and swung it down. Boom! Long Qian's back was hit by a wave, and she fell into the sea again. She didn't pop her head out of the water for a long time. Long Xia opened his mouth wide, unable to make a sound for a long time. In the blink of an eye, he saw Mu Xingchen rushing over with a solemn expression. Long Xi hurriedly said, "Co-cousin. Please persuade him." Mu Xingchen didn't even bother to look at Long Hua. Although I didn't see what happened in the abyss of the sacrificial sea, I can roughly guess what happened. Long Qian, ask yourself. Is what Long Qian did to Jojo fair? Does she still have any humanity? Cousin, you think I want to plead for grandmother? Long Huan could not help but laugh bitterly. I'm not shameless enough to plead for her again. I'm just worried about Shangyun's safety. Long Huan's face was full of worry. Shangyun won't be able to take it after being beaten up by cousin. She didn't know anything from the beginning to the end. She doesn't even know that I listened to my grandmother and came to the Snow Island to approach my cousin. Cousin, I hope you can persuade her. Please ask cousin to be merciful on account of the time she spent with Shangyun. Mu Xingchen coldly glanced at Long Huan and shook his head. You don't understand her. You've spent so much time with her, but you still don't understand her. Chapter 4754. It's impossible for Jojo to take out her anger on others and kill the innocent. Mu Xingchen looked at Long Yin indifferently. Her actions won't hurt Long Shangyun. She probably just wants to drive Long Qian's soul out of Long Shangyun's body. Is that so? The light flashed through Long Yun's eyes after his shock. However, Mu Xingchen no longer paid any attention to him. His gaze was fixed on his sister from afar. Sikong Fuling rushed to Mu Xingchen's side and humped softly. The little stoic is still the same. She gives people the feeling that she's very unreasonable. If you don't know her well, who would know her intentions? Mu Xingchen didn't speak. Sikong Fuling stole a glance at him and muttered, "There's a soft heart under that stoic face. I already knew when we were in the Mystic Beast Forest in the lower star domain." Although Mu Xingchen didn't say anything, a faint smile flashed through his eyes. On the other side, Long Qian's soul couldn't stay in Long Shangyun's body any longer after being slashed a dozen times by Arbor's figure formed from water. She hastily flew out. When Long Shangyun's body sank into the sea without her noticing, the wood spirit whip in Arbor's hand flashed and coiled around her body, pulling and flinging her. Long Shangyun's limp body was sent flying towards Long Huan. Long Yun hastily swam forward and caught his sister that Arbor tossed over. He glanced at Arbor with a complicated expression. Meanwhile, Long Qian's soul wanted to escape the instant it left her body. However, Arbor had already calculated and set up an isolation talisman formation the moment he pulled her soul out of Long Shangyun's body. No matter how good Long Qian was at escaping, she couldn't escape from her formation for the time being. Long Qian screamed anxiously. Her soul flickered in and out of existence in midair, as if it would disappear completely in the next second. Heavenly Dao suddenly said, "This person acted recklessly and used her clan's secret technique to secretly summon a holy region elder. This noble one must punish her." Arbor coldly rejected him. "You're no longer needed here, Heavenly Dao." It felt like the little stoic was extremely disdainful of him. When it was time for you to go on stage, you dilly-dallied and didn't go on stage. When it's not your time to speak, you're randomly interrupting. The little stoic coolly swept a glance at Heavenly Law. She pointed with a finger, and that gigantic wave silhouette in midair abruptly descended. The illusory Fushi sword in his hand revealed a shapeless pressure that came from the ancient times. And it instantly shocked everyone present to the point they went perfectly silent. When Xian Huang jumped out of the abyss, her heart couldn't help but skip a beat. Looking at the little fellow's pale face and fluctuating spirit, he was secretly using the power of the Fushi greatsword again. Why was this child so worrisome? She couldn't stop worrying if she didn't take a look at him. By the time Dark Phoenix flew over, the sword under the little stoic's command had already heavily chopped down. The seawater immediately split open from the middle, as if it had been split into a cross-section. Between the two sections, the seawater gushed out like two waterfalls in the direction of the underwater abyss. Heavenly Dao wailed as he rushed forward, shouting, "Little stoic, you can't destroy things like this. Fuck. How could she take out a sage weapon and randomly chop it, splitting mountains and splitting seas, cutting a large fissure in the sea of forgetfulness?" From the looks of it, he didn't know if he could patch up this large fissure, even if he replenished it for 3 years. How? The little stoic was too deceitful. Chapter 4755. Arbor expressionlessly glanced at him. When Tiandao's eyes met her clear and cold moon-like eyes, and her desolate expression, his heart couldn't help but sink. This little girl wanted to— could it be that she wanted to exterminate the entire river of forgetfulness? This matter was serious. Tiandao was as anxious as an ant on a hot pan. He looked up and saw Xian Huang's head popping up. Quick. Aya, you're finally back. Hurry and bring your brat back. I almost had a heart attack because of her. Quick, stop fooling around. Splitting mountains and splitting seas and diverting water to fill up the river of forgetfulness isn't a joke. Xian Huang grabbed the fussing Tiandao and sternly shouted, "Calm down. Fuck, who's the one who's restless now?" "It's your disciple." Tiandao's gaze abruptly landed beside the little stoic. Whose spirit is this?" At this time, a spirit that was so faint it was almost transparent slowly popped out beside the little stoic. The little stoic recognized it at a glance. It was Senior Long Xuanji. When Long Qian saw Ancestor Xuanji appear, he immediately hid behind her and stammered, "Ancestor, save me." However, Senior Xuanji didn't even look at Long Qian. His gaze landed on the little stoic and he gently said, "Child, stop for now. Your soul is very unstable right now. Why aren't you retrieving this holy weapon?" Xian Huang frowned slightly and floated to her little disciple's side. She glanced suspiciously at Long Xuanji's soul and thought, "This soul is already so faint that it's almost transparent. It should only be a small wisp of soul, and will disperse after 15 minutes at most." The little stoic was a person who clearly distinguished gratitude and grudges. The one who had a grudge against her was Long Qian, while Long Xuanji had always treated her with kindness. This ancestor of the Xuanji family had played an indelible role in pushing her forward on the path of her growth. She couldn't act like she was indifferent to others. Hence, she put away the Fushi sword. However, the huge projection that was formed from the ocean currents was still in midair. It was just that it was frozen and motionless at this time, and not a single drop of water fell. The little stoic bowed respectfully to Long Xuanji and said to herself, "Senior, out of the 103 first-generation disciples of the Xuanji school, we've already found more than 80 people." Long Xuanji's eyes shone with gratification. He nodded and his tone became more relaxed. "Second sect master, your whole family is stupid." He had said this in front of Long Xuanji's soul projection in the Xuanji mystic realm. Now that Long Xuanji had said this in front of his half-conscious soul, Senior Xuanji looked a little confused. Previously, in Senior Tianjizi's secret realm, I helped you teach Senior Tianjizi's disciple, Senior Tiantuzi, a lesson. When Long Xuanji heard this, a trace of joy flashed across his eyes. "Is that so? Good child. You really didn't waste the heavy responsibility I entrusted to you. You've completed so many things so quickly, as expected of the second-generation sect master of the Xuanji school." Wait a minute. She didn't seem to have come out to chat idly with the little stoic. She still had something important to say. Otherwise, her soul would dissipate with the wind. Strange. Why was he inexplicably led astray by the little girl's words? Long Xuanji hastily organized his thoughts and said bluntly, "Second sect master, please spare the merfolk in the land of forgetfulness. These disappointing things can't be helped by rotten mud, but they're still my clansmen after all." Chapter 4756. Long Xuanji's words caused Long Qian's face to turn green and white. She opened her mouth to refute, but she saw Long Xuanji turn around and slap her. Slap! Long Qianmu was dumbfounded. She didn't expect that as a divine soul, she could feel a burning pain from her soul after being slapped by another soul. "Long Qian, do you know your crime?" Ancestor Xuanji chided her with a dark expression. The moment Ancestor Xuanji appeared, Long Huan and the Merman Juniors had already curled up their bodies and lowered their bodies to pay their respects in the sea. "What crime have I committed?" Long Qian shouted in dissatisfaction. Ancestor Long Xuanji had humiliated her, the leader of the dragon clan, just for a junior. How could she face the rest of the clan in the future? "You are selfish. For your own selfish desires, you implicated the entire river of forgetfulness and the innocent mermaids." Long Qian was enraged. "I didn't." "You did." Long Xuanji interrupted her and said coldly, "The 10,000-year-old mermaid pearl was left behind by our ancestors. It is indeed the most precious treasure of our mermaids. However, it was said when we left it behind, only those who are capable will get it. Did you remember what I said? Did you take it to heart?" Long Xuanji questioned sternly. "Long Qian is your daughter. She is a very outstanding child. The 10,000-year-old mermaid pearl chose her. This is her fortune and her misfortune. Her misfortune is that she has such a self-righteous mother like you. Why did you insist that she contribute the 10,000-year-old mermaid pearl to the clan? Was it really just to follow your instructions and place the mermaid pearl in the clan, so that the juniors could be baptized by the mermaid pearl at any time? You clearly know that for those children who are not talented, it is useless no matter how much you baptize them. The 10,000-year-old mermaid pearl will only have a negligible effect on them. This mermaid pearl will only have the greatest effect in the hands of the most talented person. Long Qian did not bury this 10,000-year-old mermaid pearl. She gave it to the most talented child in our clan, the second-generation sect master of the Xuanji sect. This matter should have ended here. It's you. It's because of your own selfish desires that you've caused such a huge disaster, bringing disaster to the entire river of forgetfulness." Every word that Long Xuanji said was like a gem. With every word that he said, Long Qian's face turned even paler. In the end, Long Qian could only open and close her mouth. She couldn't make a single sound. Long Xuanji shook his head. "I know that you want to lead the entire river of forgetfulness back to its former glory. But in everything, one must act according to one's capabilities. Everything in the world must follow the will of the heavens. You also know that the descendants of the Forgotten River Dragon clan are not as talented as before. Is it really because the 10,000-year mermaid pearl is not in the clan? It's because you're rotten, you're useless." Although I hate your cowardice and stupidity, I have no choice but to stand up and beg for mercy in front of this little girl. Long Qian, you've been blinded by greed and selfishness. Because of some trivial matters, you secretly summoned the 13 ascended elders of the clan and caused them to lose their lives in the river of forgetfulness. I represent the ancestors of the dragon clan to take your life. Do you have any questions? At this moment, a short blade flew towards Long Qian. Senior Xuanji moved his finger, and the short blade pierced through Long Qian's soul. Chapter 4757. Even though Long Qian reacted quickly and wanted to avoid it, there was nothing she could do. After being targeted by Long Xuanji's powerful spiritual soul, Long Qian had nowhere to run. She could only watch as the dagger pierced through her spiritual body. That bone-chilling cold caused her to feel a trace of panic for no reason. No, it was impossible. She couldn't have disappeared in the Wangchuan realm. She was Long Qian, the future and hope of the Wangchuan Dragon Clan. She was the Dragon Clan leader, who could lead the Wangchuan Dragon Clan back to its peak. Long Qian was in a daze as she lowered her head mechanically. She couldn't hide the shock in her eyes as she watched herself shatter into pieces and disappear with the wind. She couldn't accept it. In the end, Long Xuanji only glanced at Long Qian indifferently, taking in the unwillingness in her eyes. Then he shook his head and couldn't help but sigh. He didn't expect the Wangchuan Dragon Clan to have a clan leader who was so determined to return to its peak. But was that possible? With the passage of time, there were many changes from generation to generation. It had been 300 to 400 years since the Wangchuan Dragon Clan reached its peak. No clan could boast that they would be able to prosper forever. Even the prosperous Divine Continent, Underworld Continent, and Song Continent could guarantee that their descendants would be able to prosper and last forever. It couldn't be. Everything could only follow the laws of heaven and follow the development of history. That was all. Long Xuanji couldn't help but shake his head. He took one last look at Long Qian's soul fragment before it disappeared into the sea. From today onwards, the remaining members of the Wangchuan Dragon Clan will be exiled to the Wangchuan Cold Valley. Ancestor Long Xuanji's cold words caused everyone to be slightly stunned. Long Huan. When Ancestor Xuanji said Long Huan's name coldly, the latter's body trembled. He quickly swam out from the group of mermaids and bowed. Junior Long Huan greets Ancestor Xuanji. Ancestor Xuanji nodded calmly. Your grandmother's mistake almost destroyed the entire Wangchuan Dragon Clan. Now that I have punished her, do you have any complaints? Long Huan shook his head blankly. Young Master Ding, who was standing not far away, watched all of this with cold eyes. When he saw Long Huan's reaction, a trace of interest flashed across his eyes. Who would have thought that this young Master Long would have such a day? Looking at his silly appearance, he was probably struck dumb by the series of blows he had received. His sister was possessed by her selfish grandmother. His grandmother had been killed by his ancestors. All the clansmen had to move to a barren land like the cold valley of forgetfulness, and they would have to endure the torment of starvation and poverty all year round. The clansmen of the Dragon Clan of Forgetfulness were barely able to keep their lives. But what future did they have? What a huge joke. Young Master Ding's eyes flickered. With a faint and indifferent smile, he lowered his head slightly. If he could see the expression on Long Qiu's face right now, it would definitely be quite interesting. What should he do? He seemed a little impatient. She really wanted to know how the high and mighty Madame Long would feel when she found out that she had been tricked by the old madam, and would be sent to the cold valley of Wangchuan to dig for wild vegetables TKSK. The more she thought about it, the more interesting it was. While young Master Ding was gloating, Long Huan and the others' faces were ashen. They opened their mouths and wanted to plead for mercy on their behalf. Chapter 4758. However, Ancestor Xuanji's words stopped them from begging for mercy. Between death and going to the cold valley of Wangchuan, which one do you prefer? There was no room for negotiation. That was the truth. Ancestor had sold her face and forcefully saved them from the stoic little girl. How could they continue to bargain? Long Qian turned towards Arbor. When he saw her looking back at him coldly, he couldn't help but sigh. Ancestor Xuanji waved at him. Long Qian walked over with his sister Long Shangyun. Ancestor. Long Xuanji nodded. He reached out his transparent hand and patted Long Shangyun's neck a few times. Long Shangyun slowly woke up. She looked at her ancestor, who was as pale as glass, as if a lifetime had passed. Ancestor? Tears streamed down her face the moment she opened her mouth. After being possessed by her grandmother, her soul was like a bystander, silently watching everything unfold. She was very clear about what had happened to her body. It was just that she was powerless to stop her grandmother. She didn't know what to say now. All sorts of feelings welled up in her, and she was in a daze. Long Xuanji sighed and looked at her. You're called Long Shangyun? Long Shangyun nodded. Long Xuanji said, your body was possessed by Long Qian before. Although she was forced out by Jojo, she stayed in your body for a long time. Her soul is much stronger than yours, causing your body to show signs of collapse. Senior, is there any way to remedy this? Long Qian's tears flowed. He couldn't bear the pain and agony in his heart. He started to regret it. He regretted not listening to his father and believing his grandmother's nonsense. She said that everything was for the family. Only by saving Long Shuiyuan would the Wangshuan dragon family have a future. But in the end, Long Qian personally pushed Long Shuiyuan out to block the lightning and threw her to her death. Why didn't his grandmother think about it when she was on the brink of death? If she pushed Long Shuiyuan to her death, there would be no future for Wangshuan? Senior Xuanji was right. Everything was his grandmother's selfishness. She kept arguing and saying that she wanted Long Chuyun's aunt to return the 10,000-year-old mermaid pearl. In reality, who would the mermaid pearl end up in the end? Her. Everything was for her own sake. No matter how dignified she sounded, she couldn't absolve herself of her selfishness. Long Huan closed his eyes and knelt down in front of Long Xuanji, kowtowing heavily. Ancestor, please help Shangyun. The whole thing has nothing to do with her. She was just implicated by Wu Wang. Long Shangyun smiled bitterly and reached out to hold her brother's hand. Big brother, it's already a great fortune to be able to survive. There's no need for us to make things difficult for our ancestors. Long Xuanji sighed and turned to look at Arbor, waving at her. The little stoic walked over with a cold expression and didn't utter a word for a long time. Long Xuanji said, Second Sect Master, do you have anything to say about my arrangements? Arbor remained silent and looked at Long Xuanji indifferently. It was so long that Long Xuanji thought that Arbor was unwilling to speak. The little stoic spoke in an extremely cold voice. You already knew my identity when you gave me the 10,000-year-old Xuanji core back then? Long Xuanji shook his head and couldn't help but laugh. Little fellow, I'm not that resourceful. But speaking of which, Chapter 4759. This is a fate that can't be cut off. Ill-fated, Arbor said bluntly. If not, why would she fall out with the dragon clan of Wangchuan? Long Xuanji laughed and shook his head. Child, the dragon clan of Wangchuan went to the cold valley. They might not return in 10 or 100 years. Look, can you forgive them? Never. Arbor interrupted Senior Xuanji coldly. Senior, you've done me a favor. If you want me to let them go, I'll do as you wish. Xiaomu stated coolly. But that's as far as you go. I have nothing to do with the dragon clan of Wangchuan. Senior, you've been gone for so many years. You should be relieved. What she meant was, Senior, don't interfere with the matters between the dragon clan and me. Long Qian had led people to chase after her. They had joined forces with the duo clan of Wangchuan to kill her. They had even summoned a powerful sacred beast. They had failed to harm her, but they had caused Emolien and the venerable Peach Blossom Immortal to be in danger. How could she forgive them? That was strange. Now it was only because Long Qian and the 13 elders of the holy region had been killed. Arbor could let go of the dragon clan of Wangchuan, but it didn't mean that she could make peace with them. Long Xuanji was rendered speechless by the young lady's words. He nodded helplessly. Jojo. Long Xuanji sighed. I'm sorry. Arbor's eyes were cold. She didn't say anything else. She nodded slightly at Long Xuanji and turned to walk toward Xian Huang. Long Xuanji looked at her stiffened back and said softly to Long Huan, "You're on your own now." His silhouette slowly lost its brilliance and disappeared like the wind and clouds. "Ancestor! Ancestor!" Long Huan and the others called out. They watched as Long Xuanji's figure faded until there was nothing left. Arbor, whose back was facing Long Xuanji, clenched her fists tightly. She didn't turn around. Her ill-fated relationship with the Dragon Clan of Forgetfulness had been completely resolved the moment she turned around. She didn't want to turn back, even if it was just to take another look at Long Xuanji. Everything was over even though Long Qian wasn't killed by her. She still died because of her. The 13 elders of the sanctuary had also died in the Sea of Forgetfulness because of Long Qian's summons. No matter what, the existence of this blood would stand between her and the Dragon Clan of Forgetting River. Arbor walked to Xian Huang's side and exchanged glances with his master. Xian Huang raised her hand and touched her head. "Don't be sad, little treasure. Master, did you find it in the abyss of the sacrificial sea?" Xian Huang looked at her for the entire night and nodded with a slightly solemn expression. "It's so deep that you can't see the bottom. Xiaobao, your divine soul is not stable. You must not go down." As soon as he finished speaking, the master saw that his little disciple looked like she was about to cry. She hurriedly reached out to pull Xiaobao into her arms and stroked the child's fur. "Xiaobao, be good. Don't be sad. I've gone down to investigate. Even though that place is very strange, it's not a dangerous place for the 2 boys who fell down." "Master, can they still come back?" "Of course." Xian Huang turned around and glared at the heavenly Tao as she spoke. The latter looked at her innocently with a helpless expression. What could the heavenly Tao say? The invisible suction force in the abyss of the sacrificial sea wasn't something it could control. Was it to blame? Chapter 4760. Xian Huang, things are almost done. Can you scram back now? Tiandao glanced at her and asked weakly. Xian Huang retorted, "What's the hurry?" Didn't he see that her little disciple's emotions were fluctuating? She was not at ease leaving her little disciple like this. Tiandao curled his lips and did not dare to be long-winded with Xian Huang. This fellow knew Xian Huang too well. If he irritated her with his chatter, he would definitely not have a good ending. The effect would be better if he did not overdo it. Xiaomu tugged on Xian Huang's hand so tightly that it tugged at Xian Huang's heart. This child really made one's heart ache. If it was possible, Tiandao suddenly jumped in front of the two and smiled flatteringly. "Xian Huang, you've been here for too long this time. If you don't hurry back, it will be difficult for me." Xian Huang glared at it angrily. Tiandao thought to himself, "It's too difficult for me." If not for Xian Huang's gaze, he would not have jumped forward to interrupt. It was mainly because of Xian Huang. If she was unreliable, she would be more willful and unreliable than anyone else. She could not forcibly drag the little girl from this world to her world. Otherwise, it would really be a mess. Xian Huang glanced at Tiandao and snorted. "Don't worry, my disciple has a family here. I can't take her away." Then she waved at Tiandao with a face full of disdain. "Go away. I want to say a few words to my disciple." Tiandao curled his lips and quietly slipped to the side with a faint sadness of being disdained. A pair of small black eyes could not help but roll around. Xian Huang ignored the old fellow and pulled her disciple to the side. She whispered, "Little treasure, you've used the Fushi sword twice in a row. Your soul has been greatly damaged. You have to be obedient for a while. Don't use your divine sense too much. Can you listen to Master?" Arbor nodded obediently, indicating that she had listened to her master's words. Xian Huang glanced at the soul-calming frost jade hanging around her neck. She reached into her bosom and took out a gourd-shaped medicine bottle and handed it to her little disciple. "Child, here is a soul-subduing pill. Take one a day for a month. It will help you repair your soul." Xiaomu nodded her small head. "Master, are you leaving?" Xian Huang was stunned for a moment before she nodded. She raised her hand and patted the little fellow's head. "You must be well. Promise me that you will protect yourself well." Heavenly Tao had been secretly observing them for a while. At this moment, he hurriedly jumped up and smiled obsequiously. "Dark Phoenix, Do you want me to send you on your way? Get lost, can't I walk on my own? After Xian Huang finished speaking, she turned around and made a gesture to her little disciple. Then, she tore open the space in front of her and disappeared instantly. Heavenly Tao pursed his lips and mumbled to himself. He then hurriedly looked at the little girl with a grin. That stoic face. The little stoic ignored him and turned to say to little Tai Sui and the others, I'm going to stay here for a while. Waiting for her lotus, waiting for rotten peach blossoms. Until they came back. Although little Tai Sui did not know what was going on, he still nodded. Okay. Arbor called out to Mu Xingchen and put them all into the star domain. She turned around and was about to leave when she suddenly heard Long Shangyun say, Cousin. Arbor originally wanted to leave without looking back, but she heard Long Shangyun say urgently, You can make a trip to the Pool Lotus Sacred Realm. We once saw a wisp of Crown Prince Emolien's soul projection there. Chapter 4761. Arbor's footsteps paused, and she turned to look in Long Shangyun's direction. The latter nodded slightly at her with a slightly bitter expression. Actually, as long as it's a cultivator who often goes to the Pond Lotus Sacred Realm, they should have seen it. I feel that if you go to Pond Lotus Sacred Realm and find the Crown Prince's soul, it should help you find where he is. Long Shangyun didn't say anything else. Arbor understood her meaning. If that really was Emolien's soul, then she might be able to contact Jojo's lotus. However, she didn't feel very hopeful about this. After all, from what she knew, Emolien's soul should be very complete. His knowledge pool had never been injured before, so he still didn't know what that wisp of soul was. But if it was only in terms of appearance, Arbor's gaze fell on Long Shangyun, and she stared for a while before saying, So when you first saw Emolien, you acted so strangely. She remembered that when she saw Emolien back then, she had even looked at him a few more times in astonishment, and had almost blurted out something to Long Huan. In the end, Long Huan pulled on his arm and he shut up. What Long Shangyun was surprised about was that she had seen a soul that looked very similar to Emolien in Pond Lotus Sacred Realm. I'm sorry, cousin, Long Huan said in a low voice. I've never told you about this. The soul that looks like Crown Prince Lien has always been wandering around Pond Lotus Sacred Realm. People who went to train would occasionally meet it once or twice. I've never told you before. It's because Pond Lotus Sacred Realm is the only place that is jointly guarded by the great clans of Forgotten River. Even if I told you, without the permission of the other clans, you wouldn't be able to enter that place. A year ago, an elder of the Forgotten River Duo clan wanted to refine this soul. Long Huan sighed. However, in the end, he didn't come out of Pond Lotus Sacred Realm. After that, Pond Lotus Sacred Realm automatically sealed itself, and no longer allowed anyone to enter. That's why I didn't tell sister to tell you about it. It's useless even if I tell you. No one can enter now. Arbor was expressionless as he nodded at the siblings. Upon seeing this, Long Huan sighed lightly and cupped his hands at Xiao Mu. Farewell. Goodbye. Long Shangyun nodded weakly at the little crown princess. She seemed to be in a very bad mental state, and her face was exceptionally pale. The cold valley of the River of Forgetfulness this time was known as the most barren and difficult place in the River of Forgetfulness. They probably wouldn't be able to come out for the next 100 years. Thinking about it this way, Ancestor Xuanji's punishment of the Long siblings and the rest of the dragon clan was not light. Long Shangyun, Arbor suddenly called out to her. Long Shangyun turned around to look at her. Suddenly, she saw a white jade porcelain medicine bottle flying towards her. Long Huan hastily reached out to take it and glanced at Arbor in astonishment. He probably did not expect that this black-hearted little stoic would actually throw a bottle of medicinal pills to his younger sister. There are 30 soul-subduing pills in the jade bottle. You can take one every 5 days. It will more or less help you a little. Long Shangyun smiled at her. Her smile was slightly pale and did not have its usual radiance. Many thanks. Xiao Mu watched as the siblings left with their clansmen, and she only retracted her gaze after a long while. Looking back at the calm surface of the River of Forgetfulness, Arbor's eyes deepened. Chapter 4762. Since they planned to stay in the River of Forgetfulness for a while, Arbor discussed with Rongqing and the others. They set up a defensive talisman formation on the original snowy island and had everyone settle down there for the time being. Those who needed to cultivated, and those who needed to refine pills concocted pills. Right now, Xiaomu could only make herself slightly busier in order to not let her imagination run wild. Huang He and the others also didn't dare to ask. Ever since they sent off the Long siblings that day, Jojo became increasingly taciturn. She usually kept herself as busy as a small spinning top. If she wasn't guiding them in pill refinement, she was helping Rongqing and speeding up their training. The cultivators complained incessantly in their hearts, but they didn't dare to reveal anything on the surface. They had all deeply experienced the little stoic's methods. Try it if you dare to complain. I guarantee you'll suffer 100 times more than others the next day. This stoic face was just this swindling. What could you do to her? 3 days later, Arbor strolled back and forth on the surface of the River of Forgetfulness by herself. During this period, she had developed a habit of waiting on the surface for Jojo's lotus to return. She habitually crouched here and stared blankly at the boundless water. She had carved out a large fissure here, and an extremely deep trench appeared. The water on both sides flowed into this deep trench and flowed endlessly. The surface of the sea was still so calm without any ripples. However, they had to be very careful when they reached this place in the future. If they were swept into this trench by the rapids, it would truly be terrible luck. Arbor stared blankly at the trench again today. She sat cross-legged on a futon, and her figure seemed to grow beside the trench, firmly fixed there. She didn't slide down with the rapids, nor did she float out with the currents. She just sat there like this, staring blankly at the deep trench. She didn't know how long she had been in this state. Little Tai Sui had also come out to persuade her, but he couldn't persuade this little fellow. When Emil fell into the abyss of the sacrificial sea, Jojo's heart also fell in with her. Jojo, how about we go to the Pond Lotus Sacred Realm to take a look? Little Tai Sui came out again and stood next to the little stoic worriedly, his eyes fixed on her. Arbor looked up at the little Tai Sui. Do you think Long Shangyun's words are reliable? At that time, I feel that she has no reason to lie to you. You didn't lie to me, but if you want to go to the Pond Lotus Sacred Land, it won't be something that can be solved in a day or two. Jojo still has to wait for Lotus here. Arbor hesitated for a moment and said. Little Tai Sui secretly heaved a sigh of relief. As long as Jojo was willing to go to the Pool Lotus Sacred Realm, everything was fine. Although he didn't know if Lotus Soul existed in this Pond Lotus Sacred Realm. After all, Xiao going out for a walk and strolling around the mystic realm was much better than squatting here like a rock waiting for her husband. Arbor glanced at him. Little Tai Sui, will something happen to Jojo's lotus? Of course not. Little Tai Sui pursed his lips and said, Haven't you heard of an old saying? What? A scourge lives for 1,000 years. Arbor. Little Tai Sui harumphed and said, What can happen to him? Didn't you already know? The result of the Hidden Night Pavilion's message is that his bright lamp projection is completely unharmed, which means that he's perfectly fine. He's only fine for the time being, Arbor thought worriedly. Jojo, Little Tai Sui said seriously, I think we should go. Chapter 4763. If we don't go to the Pond Lotus Sacred Realm to take a look, how will we know whether that soul belongs to Lotus or not? If we really miss Lotus's soul, then won't we regret it immensely in the future? Arbor thought so as well, so she nodded at Little Tai Sui. Then how about you bring some people to look for it? Little Tai Sui's face was taut as he shook his head and said, That won't do. You need to personally make a trip there. After all, who knows if that guy's soul will be so perverted that he won't even recognize his own family. Arbor. If it really is his soul, even if it's just a trace of his soul brand, he definitely won't attack you. If he attacks you, then it means it's not him. It won't be too late for us to destroy him then. Arbor blinked, feeling that Little Tai Sui's words actually made some sense. However, she still couldn't resist asking. Why do we have to destroy him if it's not Lotus's soul? Little Tai Sui humphed. Don't you feel uncomfortable looking at him? Why does he look like Emolien and not him? Arbor was actually a bit speechless. Just how much did little Tai Sui care about Jojo's Lotus? He couldn't even look like Lotus, alright. Little Tai Sui moved his small arms and legs and bounced in front of her. Go make preparations. We'll set off immediately later, okay? Right now, he had to persuade the little stoic first. He couldn't let her stay in this place and be a lookout for her husband. Arbor glanced down at little Tai Sui and suddenly reached out to pinch his small face. Tai Sui, thank you. She knew this guy just wanted to persuade her to leave this place and go somewhere else to relax. She also knew that her little companions in the star domain were all very worried about her. I've made you guys worry. Little Tai Sui humphed and hastily swatted away her paw with his small hand. He grumbled. Impudent, always wanting to get physical with this old man. Arbor couldn't help but laugh and tugged at his long hair. Why are you acting so old when you're still a child? His mood inexplicably improved somewhat. Thinking about it, the little Tai Sui was right. Since the news from the Hidden Night Pavilion said that Jojo's Lotus Soul was fine, then it should be fine. Taking 10,000 steps back, Emolien and He-Chun were together, so at least they had a companion. If they encountered any problems, they would probably be able to discuss it. Although the little guy kept comforting himself, there was still a lingering shadow in his heart. She thought of that matured berserk sacred beast. That was really an unstable factor. Little Tai Sui snuck a glance at him, pursed its lips, and said with a solemn expression, All right, don't think too much about it. Anyway, we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. His voice paused, and his expression abruptly changed. This time, he couldn't care less about pretending to be an elder lecturing her with sincere and heartfelt words. He hastily grabbed Xiao Mu's fair wrist and ordered sternly, Quickly return to the star, before he could finish saying the word domain. The river of forgetfulness shook violently. Arbor suddenly felt her body sink, and she reflexively reached out to grab the little Tai Sui's lapel. However, he only managed to grab the boy's green and white belt, which was embroidered with emerald green bamboo, before he was sent flying by a huge shock wave uncontrollably. Arbor didn't even have time to open her star domain before she fainted. On the calm surface of the river of forgetfulness, a series of explosions could be heard. The entire sea was filled with thunderous sounds. At this time, the river of forgetfulness was being bombarded by divine stone cannons. Chapter 4764. An hour ago, when Madame Long received the news that her son and daughter had moved to the cold valley of forgetfulness, she almost collapsed. Why do we have to go to the cold valley of forgetfulness? This is an order from our ancestor. Long Chiyu's expression was also very bad. He had already received news that Long Huan did not listen to him and become friends with Jojo. Instead, he followed his grandmother and did a series of foolish things. Ancestor Xuanji has already passed away for so many years. Why does she still want to interfere with the clan's matters? What Madame Long wanted to say was, what right does Ancestor Xuanji have to send the entire Wanchuan dragon clan to the cold valley of forgetfulness? Because this is an order from our ancestor. Long Qiu coughed heavily and stared at her sternly. Everyone has to accept it. Madame Long's eyes were red, and her voice was extremely mournful. Don't you know what kind of place the cold valley of forgetfulness is? How can anyone live in such a place? How long will it take for us to move there? 100 years. Long Qiu said indifferently. What? Madame Long's eyes were wide open. Why? Before Long Qiu could get angry, he heard a loud sound, and the entire sea defense barrier above them seemed to ripple slightly under the impact. Through the transparent barrier, Long Qiu and Madame Long could see countless panicked little fish, wagging their tails and running around in all directions. Deafening explosions continued to ring out. Long Qiu hurriedly called someone over and asked, What happened? Someone's attacking us. The other clans have sent a distress signal. Long Qiu's expression was grave. Who did it? We don't know yet. We only see countless god stone cannons bombarding our barrier. Madame Long cried out in panic. What? How long can the barrier last? This was no joke. The reason why they were able to live at the bottom of the forgetfulness and even be isolated was because of the barrier. Once the barrier was broken, the seawater outside would definitely pour in. At that time, the entire Forgetfulness clan's land would collapse, and the losses would be disastrous. They had just been sent to the cold valley of Forgetfulness, and were attacked repeatedly. Long Qiyu didn't believe that there was no premeditated plan. But who was it that was able to gather so many divine stone cannons? Long Qiyu took a deep breath, and quickly walked outside. Let's go and take a look. Arbor, it must be Arbor. Madame Long angrily shouted. The matriarch just left, and she immediately brought people to attack Wang Chuan. This little girl is really ruthless. Shut up. Long Qiyu glared at her in annoyance. You usually look like a smart person. But why can't you always be smart at critical moments? How could it be Jojo? She already knows that Ancestor Xuanji of the Dragon Clan banished us all to the Forgetful River Cold Valley. Given her character, she would have refuted Ancestor Xuanji's decision on the spot if she did not agree with him. Since she didn't say anything, it means that she has tacitly agreed to our ancestor's decision. Long Qiyu said with a cold voice. Isn't that perfect? Madame Long's face was full of hatred. If we all leave and are banished to the cold valley of forgetfulness, she can take over the magpie's nest and call herself the Great King. Ha, who's taking over the magpie's nest? A cold voice slowly entered Madame Long's ears. Chapter 4765. Long Qiyu and Madame Long were both startled when they saw the handsome young man strolling over with a face as cold as water. Madame Long's expression changed slightly, and she finally couldn't help but say angrily, "It's you. So it was you who brought people with the divine stone cannon to bombard our Wangchuan clan's land?" She turned her head and roared at Long Qiyu. "Look at the good son you taught. This little bastard is getting bolder and bolder." Long Qiyu clutched his chest and coughed heavily a few times. His expression was somewhat incredulous as he looked at the young man in front of him with a complicated gaze. "Yin'er, why did you do this?" A trace of alienation and indifference flashed through Ding Yun's eyes, revealing a strange light. "Do I need any special reason to do this?" "Yin'er, you hate me, don't you?" Long Qiyu looked at his son with a pained expression, and there seemed to be a flickering light in his eyes. Young Master Ding was too lazy to look at him, and said coldly, "You think too highly of yourself. I've never met you since we were young, and only recently did you know of my existence. Do you think I can hate a stranger?" Long Qiyu closed his eyes in pain, and said with certainty, "You just hate me." "Whatever you say." Ding Yun waved his hand impatiently. "Men, tie him up." Then, a few disciples of the demonic sect dressed in strange clothes came forward and attacked without any explanation. Madame Long wanted to resist, but she was not Ding Yun's opponent at all. In less than a second, she was bound by the layers of wood spirits that young Master Ding had wrapped around her. Circles of wood vines tied her body like a fried dough twist, tightly wrapping her inside. Madame Long even found it difficult to breathe normally, and her face immediately turned red. Long Qiyu hurriedly said, "Yin'er, don't do this to your mother." "Shut up." Ding Yun unhappily interrupted Long Qiyu's words and looked at him coldly. "You should take care of yourself first. Good for nothing. Sick all over. I don't know what my mother saw in you back then." Long Qiyu looked at his son with a pale face and opened his mouth, but he was speechless. "Long Yun, you disgraceful little bastard. Long Yun." Young Master Ding muttered these two words playfully. He turned his head to look at Madame Long, who was wrapped in wooden vines. A solid wood spirit whip hit the woman's body. "Ah!" Mrs. Long screamed in pain. Her eyes widened in shock as she stared at young Master Ding in disbelief. It was as if she hadn't expected Ding Yin to be so bold as to openly lay a vicious hand on her, his official mother. "You disobedient and unfilial little bastard, how dare you!" Mrs. Long's exasperated screams came to an abrupt end under another lash of the whip. Young Master Ding looked coldly at the woman in front of him. Suddenly he smiled like a spring breeze. "Madam, do you think that no one will ever find out about the vicious, heartless, and inhumane things you have done?" Madame Long's eyes narrowed slightly as she subconsciously turned to look at Ding Yun. "Long Yun, what are you talking about?" "Madam, it's better to call me Ding Yun." The man had a vicious smile on his face as he looked coldly at Madame Long. Did you think that one day, you would fall into my hands? It's not that the heavens don't punish you. Chapter 4766. Previously it was just not the right time. Ding Yun stared coldly at Mrs. Long. And now it's clearly the right time. A rare trace of panic flashed across Mrs. Long's face. Her gaze followed Ding Yun's raised arm back and forth. She opened her mouth, but seeing that the whip was about to land again, she hurriedly screamed. Long Yun, you let's talk things out. Slap. The wood spirit whip in Ding Yun's hand unceremoniously whipped the woman's white cheek. Ah! Madame Long was shocked and angry. She covered her face with her hands in fear. If Mrs. Long's memory is bad, I don't mind reminding you again. Ding Yun looked at her coldly. Madam, it's better to call me Ding Yun. I'm not used to hearing others call me by an unfamiliar name. Mrs. Long's face was distorted. Her eyes were filled with venom as she stared at Ding Yun. Ding Yun. Ding Yun smiled and nodded. Madam, if you have anything to ask, just ask. Madame Long gritted her teeth and clenched her teeth, not making a sound. Since Madame has nothing to say, then let me say it. Long Chu was finally able to see some clues. Her son seemed to have come here to settle accounts with Madame Long, but what he didn't understand was that his son had followed Ding Xian since young and never knew his wife. Where did this inexplicable hatred come from? Could it be that Ding Xian often mentioned them in front of his son? Long Chu couldn't figure it out. Ding Yun couldn't be bothered to talk nonsense with Mrs. Long. He went straight to the point. Watching your son and daughter go to a barren place like the Forgotten River Cold Valley, and not be able to leave the valley for 100 years. Isn't this heartbreaking? What are you trying to say? Mrs. Long glared at the man in front of her and shouted. Ding Yun, don't try to get information from me. It's useless. Self-righteous. Young Master Ding smiled coldly at her. What do I need to get information from a dying person like you? If I want to know something, wouldn't it be faster to search your soul? Madame Long trembled and looked up at young Master Ding in shock. The latter smiled at her gently and said, Don't worry, I won't kill you for the time being. There are some things that I want to clarify with you. You're the only one who knows about this. As for whether he would take her life after asking her, that would depend on his mood. Madame Long sneered. Do I have to answer just because you asked? As soon as she finished speaking, she felt a hand with fingers as hard as steel tightly gripping her throat. Ding Yun looked at her with a smile, his eyes filled with ruthless coldness. If you don't tell me, you won't even have the chance to see your children one last time. What do you mean? Do you still not understand, madam? Ding Yun looked at her with a cold expression and said, Do you think that I only brought people to encircle and annihilate the remaining old, weak, women and children of your Wangchuan clan? Long Chu's eyes narrowed as he suddenly shouted angrily. Yin you even sent people to deal with Ji and Shangyun? Father is still the smart one. Ding Yun smiled and nodded. You understood immediately. You. Madame Long sucked in a breath of cold air and screamed with great difficulty. You demon, you aha. Chapter 4767. Her throat tightened, causing her to be unable to spit out a single word. Ding Yun coldly looked at the woman in front of him and sneered. Before saying that I'm cruel, Madame Long, shouldn't you properly reflect on yourself? You know best what you've done in the past. Yin At the side, Long Chu was weeping with tears and snot. Yin your younger brother and sister are innocent. Innocent? Who isn't innocent? If I'm not innocent, then isn't my mother innocent? Ding Yun suddenly turned his head and roared at Long Chu with a cold expression. If you weren't too timing, would you have caused my mother's tragedy? If it wasn't for you, would my mother have been so crazy as to kill my foster father back then? And it even made me duel with my brother. Ding Yun heavily kicked Madame Long in front of him, his hand fiercely clutching her neck. If you think that Long Huan and Long Shangyun are innocent, then what about me? Am I not innocent? Who did I offend? I was locked in a small dark room by my own mother, had to duel with my own brother, and even killed him with my own hands? Long Chu looked at his son in shock, his face filled with disbelief. You said, what did you say? At this moment, Ding Yun had already sunk into a huge sorrow. It was as if he was seeing that terrifying scene from more than 10 years ago. At that time, when he pushed open the door of that gloomy and terrifying woodshed, a child pounced on him, kicking and tearing at him. He had no choice. If he didn't kill, others would kill him. At that time, he was only 10 years old. Did he want to die? What could he do if he didn't want to die? His mother left behind a ruthless sentence, saying that there could only be one person who walked out of that dark room alive. Long Qiu suddenly slumped to the ground and wailed loudly. This isn't real. This isn't real. Cry, cry, cry. You only know how to cry. Other than crying, what else can you do? Ding Yun's face was filled with anger as he angrily said to Long Qiu. If you weren't indecisive and too timing back then, harming others and yourself, how could Mother have become like this? Mother's mental illness is getting worse and worse. Otherwise, why would she be crazy enough to lock us two brothers in the same room and force us to fight to the death? No, you're not telling the truth now. Of course, what Yin'er said can't be entirely true. A voice full of vicissitudes of life suddenly sounded from outside. Long Qiu's expression froze, unexpectedly turning his head to look. He saw a woman who looked to be in her 50s. Her cheekbones were thin, and her cheeks were full of wrinkles. She was leaning on a walking stick carved out of ebony wood, and slowly walked over. Mrs. Long was wrapped in a pile of vines. She stared at the old woman who walked in with a hint of anger in her eyes. Ding Xian, look at your good son. However, Ding Xian didn't say anything to Madame Long. She didn't even bat an eyelid at her. In the blink of an eye, she looked towards Long Qiu and said coldly, although what Yin'er said is not entirely true, a part of it is. Long Qiu trembled, almost not daring to look directly into Ding Xian's eyes. He didn't expect that after not seeing her for more than 20 years, when they met again, it would be in such a scene. She was simply so old that he didn't dare to recognize her. Long Qiu's heart trembled slightly. If they were to walk on the street like this, the two of them would pass each other face to face. Long Qiu definitely wouldn't recognize that this was Ding Xian herself. Chapter 4768. She had changed too much. Could a person change so much in 20 years? Long Qiu's heart was filled with emotions as he sat on the ground in a daze, looking up at that woman. Back in the day, she was also a beautiful young lady, as beautiful as a flower. How could she have changed so much? Yin'er. Ding Xian looked at Ding Yun and said indifferently, even now, you still suspect that the first person Mother let you kill when you were 10 years old was your twin brother? Ding Yun looked at his mother with a complicated gaze, unable to speak for a long time. Ding Xian said, I was indeed pregnant with twins at that time. However, your younger brother died when he was born. The one you killed when you were 10 years old was actually just a shadow guard. Ding Yun was stunned, but he still looked at Ding Xian in disbelief. Ding Xian continued, do you still remember that child's appearance? He didn't look like you at all, did he? No matter how ruthless Mother is, it's impossible for me to let you kill your own brother. Then what about foster father? Why do you believe those specious rumors? Ding Xian said coldly, your foster father was indeed killed by me, but at that time, he was plotting to seize our Beijing manor. How could I let him succeed? The marriage alliance between Carefree Valley and Beijing Manor. Your foster father was eyeing Beijing Manor's sphere of influence. How sincere do you think he was to you? He just gave you some small favors. Ding Xian looked at her son indifferently. Don't be confused by a little bit of so-called warmth. Yes, back then, he accompanied you to practice martial arts, and you had a deep relationship with him. But so what? Ding Xian's voice was very cold. He just valued your identity. Mother, is what you said today true? When has Mother ever lied to you? Ding Xian looked at Ding Yun, then shook her head and turned to Long Qiu. She finally looked him in the eye. Their gazes met, and for a moment, all sorts of feelings welled up in their hearts. 50520. She had changed too much. Could a person change so much in 20 years? Long Qiu's heart was filled with emotions as he sat on the ground in a daze, looking up at that woman. Back in the day, She was also a beautiful young lady, as beautiful as a flower. How could there be such a huge change? Yinner. Ding Xian looked at Ding Yun and said indifferently, even now, you still suspect that the first person mother let you kill when you were 10 years old was your twin brother? Ding Yun looked at his mother with a complicated gaze, unable to speak for a long time. However, Ding Xian said, I was indeed pregnant with twins at that time. However, your younger brother died at birth. The one you killed when you were 10 was just a secret guard. Ding Yun was stunned, but his gaze still looked at Ding Xian in disbelief. Ding Xian continued, do you still remember the child's appearance? He doesn't look like you at all, does he? No matter how ruthless I am, I can't let you kill your own brother. What about adoptive father? Why do you believe those specious rumors? Ding Xian coldly replied, I was indeed the one who killed your foster father, but he was plotting to seize my Beijing Manor, so how could I possibly let him succeed? Carefree Valley and Beijing Manor are connected by marriage. Your foster father is eyeing the sphere of influence of Beijing Manor. How sincere do you think he is to you? It's just some small favors that he usually gives you. Ding Xian glanced at her son indifferently. Don't be confused by a little bit of so-called warmth. Yes, back then, he accompanied you to practice martial arts, so you have a deep relationship with him. But so what? Ding Xian's voice was extremely cold. He only values your identity. Mother, is what you said today true? When has mother ever lied to you? Ding Xian glanced at Ding Yun, then shook her head and turned to Long Chuyu. She finally looked him in the eye. Their gazes met, and for a moment, all sorts of feelings welled up in their hearts. Chapter 4769. Even if Madame was jealous, it was impossible for her to do such a thing. How could she poison Xian and even harm Yinner? Long Chuyu subconsciously shook his head. When his gaze met Ding Xian's, his entire body couldn't help but turn cold. Ding Xian was actually looking at him with such a hateful gaze? Long Chuyu hurriedly turned to look at Ding Yun, as if he wanted to verify something. He looked at his son with pleading eyes. Yinner, tell father, is what your mother said true? What love-severing poison? Was it really passed to Yun or through his mother's womb? Ding Yun's gaze coldly swept across his face. So what if I tell you, can you avenge me? Long Chuyu immediately looked like he had suffered a great blow, then turned to look at Madame Long, who was locked in the vines. Madam, why did you do this? You're asking me why I did this? Madame Long shrieked. If I didn't do this, would that bitch Ding Xian have left so willingly? You almost abandoned me for a woman from a lower star field. What else can't I do? Long Chuyu looked at her with a face full of shock. Ding Yun saw this, and only felt that it was extremely funny. He felt that his father was really funny. He was clearly the one who had a foot in both boats, wavering left and right to harm others. Yet he revealed an expression of I'm also a victim. It was really comical and laughable. Ding Yun shook his head, too lazy to say anything more to him. He turned and walked to Madame Long's side, then heard Long Chuyu call him mournfully from behind. Yinner, Yinner. Long Chuyu asked with a face full of pain. Does the love-severing poison affect you? Ding Yun felt that his father was becoming more and more laughable. He turned and gave him a charitable glance. What do you think? That's the one and only love-severing poison in the world. Do you think it will affect me? I've had poison in my body since I was young. When I was young, the poison would flare up on the 1st and 15th of every month. In order to survive, I had no choice but to fuse with the fire Qilin Fang snake's poison. It was extremely dangerous, who could I tell? You think I wanted to fuse with this snake's poison and become a detestable demonic cultivator? I'm doing this to survive. Ding Yun looked at him coldly. Yinner. Long Chuyu cried out sorrowfully. Father did not know about this, father. Now that you know who the culprit is, will you stand up for me? Can you solve this problem for me? Can you make your wife hand over the antidote to the love-severing poison? Long Chuyu was left speechless by his series of questions. Ding Yun looked at him indifferently as a sneer appeared on his lips. You can't do anything. Brother. Sikong Fuling walked briskly to her side. The people in the front and rear courtyards have all been arrested, and there are still more than 200 people left. They are all old, weak women and children. I know. Ding Yin nodded. They only received the housewarming notice today. I'm afraid they won't even have time to cry before we take them all down. The remaining old, weak women and children in the clan would also have to move to the cold valley of the River of Forgetfulness. But to them, the cold valley of the River of Forgetfulness was no different from hell on earth. They might not be able to return alive after going there. Sikong Fuling looked at Madame Long with disdain. Did this woman confess? Did she say how to cure the poison? You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support. And don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.